That's smart.
automatically battery operated. It is radio controlled. It's not. We have the frequency.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our November 4th, 2024 Board of County Commissioners Strategic Planning Meeting. It's 9 o'clock. Let the record reflect that all 5 commissioners are here present, and we'll go ahead and get going because I think it's the agenda is starting. So, Lori Park.
Right. So I do have a PowerPoint.
Was Randy going to start? I guess I'm looking at the agenda here.
We'll just get right into
Oh,
it.
yeah.
Okay.
Let's just go ahead.
All right. So I'm Lori Markham. I'm the Executive Director for Spokane Regional Emergency Communications. I brought with me my Deputy Director, Kim Arredondo, in case you have any specific operations questions, and also my Technical Services Director, in case there's any questions about our radio IP area. So for our agenda, we're going to be going over governance, leadership, members, and partners, our budget overview, our operations overview, and then highlights and accomplishments. Our goal is to just give you a good idea of what's been going on with SHREC this past year and what our planning is for the future, especially on a fiscal matter. So if you go to the next slide, just as a reminder, this is my executive leadership team. So my HR, finance, and my main leaders. What we like to point out in here is that we have an extensive background in public safety. So we're aware of the job that we're asking our folks to do, and we are there to support them through that. On our next slide, you're going to see our governance. So this is our board of directors as created by this group for our charter. Again, we are led by public safety officials. The only voted member on there is Sheriff Knowles. Everyone else is either representing a fire agency or a law agency or a group of fire or law partners. So, and then additionally, we have the county CEO there, Scott, that's him right there. And that's his picture. And then Maggie Yates on the city to provide kind of feedback to us on the business side of the world, I guess. So, great, next slide. So our member and partner agencies, this past year, we had the privilege of taking on Cheney Police Department. So we now currently serve 21 out of the 22 agencies here in Spokane County. So that's 14 fire agencies and 7 law enforcement agencies. We cover all 1,700 square miles of the county. And again, we were really excited to take on the city of Cheney. That was a long time coming, and it's been great having them as partners. So the only members that we're not serving at this time are Spokane Police Department, although we do take their crime check and we take the initial call and transfer it to them. And as also the Spokane International Airport, they have their own dispatch center out there. They have a few different roles than we do. So next slide, please. Our budget overview. So as a reminder, the resources that we have, or the revenue that we have, are basically 3 pots. The first is the 1/10 of 1% sales tax. That's where we collect the most money. Our second is the 911 excise tax that comes from the state. It's off of your phone numbers. And that is slowly decreasing as time goes by. And then our last pot of money comes from our users. So basically what the tax funding does not cover, we ask our users to help pay for it on the end of that and cover our dispatch fees. We'll have a slide coming up where I'll go over what those different taxes cover so that there's an understanding of what they can and can't be used for. So in talking with the county, we decided for the 2025 proposed budget that we weren't going to make no changes from the 2024 budget. Our revenue did come in lower than we anticipated for 2024. So we thought leaving it stagnant might be the best option for that. Overall, we're looking at about $30 million for next year. I will point out in the next slide that our salary and benefits are going up about $3.3 million. That is because we were just reclassified on a state level from being clerical to being public safety, which is a great thing for our employees. It gives them some access to mental health as well as early retirement, but it also puts them in a binding arbitration union group. And so that is, we're in the middle of negotiations right now, and that is going to end up kind of raising our salaries for our employees due to the fact that our comparables are now on the west side of the state. So we do factor in the fact that they come to the east side, but they're significantly higher than what we have over here. So our employees between salary and benefits are our most expensive part of what we do. We have about 147 employees, and so that costs a bit of money. And then next is our supplies and services. That includes our radio services and our tech services, which is where we see a lot of our funding going to, especially the radio system. It's a very in-depth system and one that requires a lot of care and feeding, so it costs a bit of money. And then we have some capital outlay going out in 2025 that you'll see. A lot of that is due to our new facility and the end of our CAD project, or our computer aided dispatch project. Any questions so far on anything that I've covered?
On the sales tax,
Uh-huh.
is that paid by everybody in the county regardless of whether their jurisdiction is fully participating?
Correct, yes,
Okay, and that, all of that goes to Shrek?
it does.
Okay.
It does, and when we get to the next slide, we'll kind of talk about what that covers and what we provide with that service, so.
Okay, thank you.
County collects it and then we remit the amount to the Shrek. We hold some stuff back for Alert Spokane. We have leases that we have our towers on that the county has ownership of, so we pay those out as well. So the net goes to Shrek.
So our reserve use, that's one thing I do want to highlight is that our board has been very dedicated and responsible to putting money aside for some of the larger projects we have coming up. The two main ones were our computer aided dispatch system as well as our new facility. We have a purchase sale agreement in place for a building that we'll go over in a little bit, and we'll be closing on that mid-December. So we will be spending that funding in the next year. So as you can see, a lot of our reserves, what we're going into 2025 with at the end of 2025 will be depleted, so. And then I will again point out on the operating reserve part, that is, we have a 3-month operating reserve that we keep. Again, with a new contract with our employees, we're gonna need to write that as we move forward. So we always have 3 months worth of operating. Next slide. So just as a reminder for the 911 funding overview, what these taxes can pay for. So the 911 excise tax pays for our phone system and our staffing. That's the money that comes from the state. I will point out that we receive about $5 million for that, and we were short about $1 million this year on what that actually costs. So it's not quite covering that, and we're seeing that on a nationwide level where that funding isn't quite meeting the needs of 911 all around. The 1/10 sales tax covers the CAD system, crime check, radio system, and future 911 enhancements. So I will point out for instance, the Spokane Police Department, who's not a partner of us, we do support them in the radio. So we provide all their radio services. We maintain and operate the radio that they're on. And additionally, we also take all of their crime check calls. So the two top priorities for that initiative when it was voted in 2017 were crime check, radio, and then the list went down. So that's what that covers for them. And what we have seen in doing the exercise since the city of Spokane a few years ago went to legislation and asked for the ability to be able to portion out their funding for it. When we actually put the numbers of what it's costing us to provide that service to them versus what the city of Spokane is bringing in, they're falling short, and the rest of the county is helping to supplement them on that. And then our user fees mostly pay for the 911 triage and dispatchers, and then other staffing and support services, so the folks that take care of that. Any questions on that? Did I answer your questions? Okay. Yes, sir.
I don't want to jump ahead. Are you going to cover the legislation ask?
I was going to cover it here, and I'm glad you brought it up. Thank you, Scott. So they are looking on a statewide level of increasing that 911 excise tax. So right now that tax comes from landlines and cell phones only. It's not coming from things like our iPads or smart watches, things like that. So we're looking on a statewide level. I don't know if it'll be next year or the year after that they're looking to try to basically go in for those devices as well and start to receive funding. Because what we're seeing, landlines are pretty much going away from what we've traditionally seen, and most of the time people that have a cell phone get it at a young age and have that cell phone through their life. So
Yeah, so I'll just say, on the previous slide on fund balance, the county has a 2.5 month reserve is what we, correct me if I'm wrong, Randy. 2 month. Reserve, so it's very prudent to have that as part of your fund balance. And then, yes, as the city has talked about this legislation, you know, even it's been probably about 5 years since this legislation's been talked about or not. We have looked at what those costs are, you know, for crime check and for the radios and all of that. And if Shrek wants to bill the city back for those, if that apportionment comes out, then the bill would be higher than what is being paid. So I don't know if that helps, Chris, for you to understand kind of how that piece works. Because if we do apportion it out, then that means, you know, I think it's like $4 million in revenues would go back to the city. But then if they do that, then we'd have to bill for what the costs are. So.
And we do this exercise once a year, and every year they're anywhere between 1.5 and 2 million short on what they would need to pay for what they're receiving.
Yeah, I think the last time I looked was a couple of years ago, and it was like 6 million in expenses versus 4 million in revenues. So anyway, just to clarify that.
Any other questions on the financial part of it? Okay. So we'll move on to, oh yeah,
So right now, you don't have any outstanding debt.
No.
And the goal is, after acquiring the building and everything, how much additional debt will you need for that, or will you be able to pay for that out of reserves and any grant money we might have available for us?
so right now we have about 22.5 million for the building. We're anticipating that it's gonna, from the purchase of the building to the remodel and the needs that we have, it's gonna be between 25 and 30 million at this time.
Okay.
So we're hoping to take out as little debt as possible, knowing that, again, our taxes are looking to not go up a whole lot in the next couple of years. And the folks that will have to pay that back are our users. So we're trying to minimize that as much as possible.
The building you're buying is where?
It's in Spokane Valley, and I have some pictures of that in a little bit.
Okay, I will wait patiently.
All right.
And just to clarify,
not.
Yep.
Or not.
Go ahead.
so
Chris.
just to clarify, saying the operating reserve is 7 million for next year. 7.1, and then there's a 24 million set aside for building.
If there's 22.5, we will have, by the end of this year, we will have spent about 10 million of that on our new facility.
Okay.
And then the remainder of it will go towards the remodel and build, so.
Okay, I'm just curious, how, that's a big number, right? 24 million. How do you arrive at that? Or do you have some kind of planning process that goes on to estimate the cost of the
We do.
retrofits? What does that look like?
So we're going through an alternative build style, and what I think you kind of have to remember when we're talking about our new facility is it's not so much the retrofitting of the building, it's the items that are needed to run a 911 center that have to go in that building and increasing those. So for instance, the desks that our employees sit at run between $25,000 and $30,000 a piece. We're also looking at having to build a radio shop on there that can store all of our equipment, as well as a place for our radio folks to do their welding work, things like that. Additionally, it's a high security building. We're required to do that because of the type of business that we have. So we're having to replace every single window, and it's got some really nice daylight. But we're gonna have to do all of that with ballistic grade windows to be able to be secure, as well as some pretty intensive gates and security systems to get in and out of it. So the building itself costs $9.11 million or $911 million. I know, isn't that cute? I know, right? We thought maybe they want us, yeah.
Okay.
And so that's about what we're paying for it. So the additional parts are to outfit it, to remodel it, to pay for obviously our contractors, architects, all of that, and then get it retrofitted to a secure building for the 911 center. So
And is that basically your best guess? At
That's
this
our
point?
best guess
It's
at
not
this
like an outside consultant or anything like that.
no, we'll be going through that as we go through our alternative bill. It's that.
So when Shrek first started talking about a building 4 or 5 years ago, the board took action at the end of every single year to start putting money, any extra surplus money, into reserves. We did commission a company to do an initial estimate of what a building cost might look like. initially Shrek was looking at co-locating out next to the Sheriff's Training Center. And that's building from the ground up, so obviously more expensive. I think that original estimate by this third party was in the 40 million range.
That's 40 to 45 million.
Yeah, so with the pivot to purchasing an existing building and then retrofitting it, we've been able to reduce costs quite a bit on that. In addition to the ballistic grade windows, we also have to have a roof that'll support snow loads greater than any of our traditional buildings are as well. So it's interesting, all the work that they make you go into remodeling and retrofitting or building a brand new building up with all those elements on it.
And who sets those regulations?
Oh, sorry, that's for me. So it's set by it's APCO NENA standards, so the National Emergency Number Association, or the professionals for public safety. So what that does for us is it gives us a good idea of what it needs to be secure for us on a federal level, and then additionally, it helps us with our accreditations, things like that going forward.
So that 24 million, it's an estimate. It sounds like you're still gonna have to figure out all these different pieces, and the design build will help with that. You plan to spend all of that in 2025? Okay.
Yeah, that's our plan. We anticipate that we'll be
Or
able to-
less. if
or less,
possible.
depending, yeah.
Okay.
But we anticipate that we will hopefully move into it around Q2 of 2026. There's always the joy of trying to navigate when we think it's gonna be super busy and when a good time to move is for a 911 center, and we try to avoid fire season, especially in this area. So we're looking at wanting to do it around spring of 2026.
And the current building, Scott, you may talk about that. The current building that they're in is City of Spokane owns it, but it was actually jointly built with tax funds from both the city and the county. So and after the 20 years.
Yeah, I think it's 20 years, yeah.
You know, that then it reverted to the city to actually own it. So that's kind of how the building that they're in right now is.
Similar to our public safety building where the county owns it, city's in there, no lease costs to the city, just M&O, maintenance operations. Same with the my communications center out in the East Spokane, where city owns it, but we don't pay a lease, we just pay M&O costs. And Shrek has greatly outgrown that building.
Yes, we have.
Can you talk a little bit about user fees or the charges to member agencies, just how is that set? And then I know there's this kind of question about the city's participation. If they join fully, does that lower the user fees because you have a larger pool of agencies? I just wondering how that works.
So it will help lower the user fees for the other agencies because they're gonna come in with such a large amount. But I will also point out that because of the amount of work that is needed for Spokane Police Department, we will have to increase our employees by a pretty significant number. So it might kind of even out with no change for user fees. We don't know what that's gonna look like yet because we haven't talked to service level at all. But the way that we do it is whatever the tax funding doesn't cover, whatever kind of that delta is at the end, we take it and we divide it up between law and fire. We have a slide in a little bit that will kind of talk about how law and fire calls are determined. But law pays at this point 55%. No, it's the other way around. They're 45%, and then fire is 55% of the call volume that we take on. The reason being that we've got Spokane Fire Department that we provide service for. So we take that 55% split of that delta, and then we spread it across the agencies based on incident numbers. So how many incidents did you have for the year? So everyone kind of pays what's applicable to their work volume for us.
So that fund's kind of an operational piece, not necessarily the capital
Correct.
outlay, which would have been.
Correct.
from
Our
sales
user,
tax.
yeah, our user fees have not paid. They have not contributed to any reserves. So user fees are meant for the operational side of the house.
Okay, so is it the sales and excise primarily that have built up the reserve?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. And I will point out that when we consolidated in 2019, the Board of County Commissioners at that time transferred over 14 million that had been saved for a phone system and other future needs on the radio system. And that's a lot of where some of our reserve has come from as well, so.
On that, was that did that mainly come, the 14 million from the, sorry, get to the right slide here. From the 0.1% sales tax, emergency communication sales.
And the 911.
And the
Well,
911 excise tax.
I think it was Tessa 9 and 5.
Yeah, and a majority was from the 911 excise. They had done some great saving for the phone system because it is such a large investment. The backbone of 911.
Next slide. We're gonna start operations. I'm actually gonna pass it on to Kim to kind of talk about her wheelhouse.
All right. So this is also on our website. We do this monthly for the board so they can kind of see the breakdown of things as they roll month over month. And we compare it to the year prior as well, so we can see trends. And so what we're seeing now is we're seeing a decrease in our 911 calls, as well as our crime check calls, which is good. But we can't ever attest to the why. We can have some theories, but it just kind of is relative to what's happening. And the average wait time is what you'll see in the horizontal lines. And so we are meeting standards across the NENA for answering times as far as our 911 calls. And then when we hit our busier months, you'll see in the summer that those hold times go up. We'll always answer the 911 calls over the crime check calls. That's how our phone system is set up. And that's the nature of the emergency versus the non-emergent lines. Go ahead to the next slide. All right, so these are our crime check reports. So those have increased substantially. We did see a decrease over 21 and 22, and then we started to see an increase over 23 and 24 back to where we were prior. Our online reports, we saw a huge dip during COVID, and now we're back up to where we were previously. Can go on to the next slide. So this is what Lori was talking about in our counts for calls. Our law group, we're seeing just a slight decrease, and then we're seeing an increase in our fire dispatch calls. Go ahead to the next slide.
Hang on, go back to that really quick. I just want to kind of clarify that on a law call versus a fire call. A fire call is one incident and it can have multiple fire trucks on it, multiple ambulances, and it could go for hours on end. It still counts as one incident. Whereas law, we count every time we touch that call. So anytime we do any work for that. So that number is always a little, not a little bit, significantly larger than what we see on the fire side, just because of how they view them differently, so.
These are our EMD statistics. And so you can see that our, this is what we base off of accreditation, and we announced to our board last month that we are going for ACE accreditation. We're very excited. That's a big part of being EMD certified and having that accomplishment. There's only 2 other places in Washington state that are certified. So going for this accreditation is a big deal for us. That has to deal with hands to chest and time to queue on doing CPR. That's a big part of the statistic, but it's just an attestation to our staff and how well they do in processing those EMD calls and that's all of the medical calls of it. So going forward to do that, there's multiple criteria that we have to count off, and we've been meeting those numbers pretty regularly since February. So we wanted to give a good length of time to gather statistics to determine to move forward on that accreditation piece. So that's a big deal for our agency. Emergency medical dispatch. Thank you. Next slide. This is our staffing vacancy. We've been averaging about 7% for the majority of 2024 in our vacancy. We are overstaffed on the 911 side, and that's because that's where our dispatch staff funnels from, is directly from 911. And so we continue to hire regularly in our 911 side, and then we move folks over to law and dispatch as staffing allows. We did take a break about May on training and fire just because it's not really prudent to train during fire season. We see way more volume than we're able to actually train for, so it's pretty overwhelming. So we'll start that back up this winter for training for next fire season to get some more folks moved over there. And then our law group, we have 1 trainee and she'll be signed off here shortly, and we'll move another one in December. And report techs are fully staffed now, so that needs to be updated on that slide. And our report techs are the folks that take our reports. And just a reminder for our crime check calls, I know we've shared this before, but our crime check reports of what actually comes in on the non-emergency lines right now is averaging only 18% of actual reports. The rest are all calls for service that go over to either fire or medic or to law.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's some misperception as to what crime check is versus calling 911. So maybe this is a good time to kind of just clarify that for people so they know and understand when people are talking about crime check, versus 911.
Yeah, so our folks, they answer the same call. So it doesn't matter if you call 911, it doesn't matter if you call crime check, it's the same people trained for the same job. It's just a matter of where that call goes and how they triage it. So like I said, our phone system prioritizes emergency calls over all crime check calls. So as those triage in and crime check is coming in, those do have a longer hold time unless there's no emergency calls coming in. So same staff, same answered, same training that goes into it. They're all EMT trained, so they can all do medical emergencies. Last year in 2023, we had 57,000 emergency calls that came in on crime check. So those are folks that typically don't want to bother 911. They're not sure if they're actually having an emergency, so they'll just call into crime check. We see that a lot in our older group folks that will do that. But overall, all the emergency calls, whether they're fire, medics, or law, they'll be transferred over to dispatch through CAD. So our staff stay on the phone with them. Doesn't matter if it's medics, doesn't matter if they're law. They'll triage all the information that's immediately put into our dispatch CAD, and then that'll go over to dispatch and they'll start responders depending on where it's going, law, fire, or medics. Crime check is kind of the same. They'll triage the call. Those are typically non-emergency calls that come in. But like I said, we do have a handful of emergency calls that come in on crime check itself. But the crime check calls will be triaged. If it's a report, they'll transfer it to a report technician, so it's taken right away. That was one of the complaints we had heard during COVID from some of our citizens, that they didn't like the callback time. So we've hired up. We originally had 11 report techs. Now we have 22. So any report that comes in, we will transfer that over. They get a live person right then who takes the report. Otherwise, the call is put in at a lower priority in our CAD system and it goes over to dispatch to be triaged at that point, either pushed out to patrol or pushed out to the firefighters.
And what we typically find is that our citizens have a hard understanding of what crime check is actually meant to do. There's a belief that crime check is going to come out and do something about your call, whereas all crime check is a place for reports to go that we then give to law enforcement agencies, and it's their responsibility to follow up or not follow up on it. I'll also throw out that a lot of times folks get frustrated with crime check because they have a need that they want fulfilled that is just not a solvable crime for us to be able to handle. So if somebody stole your bike and it's, there's nothing that gives any proof of who might have taken it, it's really, you can hope that maybe one day it ends up in a pawn shop or something like that, but it's just not a solvable crime for what we're able to do for them.
So we've been doing a lot of public education with our law partners on what to do. We have a survey that we send out at the end of every report, whether it's done over the phone or it's done online. And so that's just kind of giving us feedback on our customer service to our citizens, if they felt that their report was taken timely, if they asked if they had any questions that we were able to answer or not answer. And then there's also a section for verbatims on there. And that's where we'll see a lot of the feedback of, what do I do with this evidence? I have a Ring camera, or I have a cell phone picture, or whatever it is. And so we're doing some education with the citizens on how to get that to law enforcement, because it doesn't do us any good to have it at crime check. It does need to go to the law agency with where the crime occurred. And then again, the solvability, that's a huge education piece to get citizens to understand, because no matter what, they feel that they've been victimized, and it's true. And so how do you understand that it may not be solvable, or it may be solvable, and this is what it looks like? So educating them on the fact that it is really important to know where those crimes are occurring, because law enforcement can put some attention in that area. That's really the big ticket item that we do on our end, but working with our law partners on further education for our citizens is really a big deal.
I think that's really important, because I think we still want citizens to be calling crime check and reporting that crime.
Yes.
Just so they can be monitoring and knowing what's happening in the neighborhoods. And I think there's just been some, I know, disinformation or just, information out there that, yes, it's taking, people who are sitting on crime check longer. Part of it is because the call volume on 911 is high. I mean, those are, not priority. But it's also your staffing levels were low there for a while.
Yes.
You've increased that and brought those up. So those are all taken care of now. Thank you.
Right, we'll move into some of our agency highlights that you can.
Madam Chair.
Oh, sorry.
Just backing up a little bit, the wait time piece, you talked about kind of meeting standards and what standards are those? Like what's the,
So that's our
what do you
NENA,
strive for?
yeah, that's our NENA standard. It's
It's 15
seconds.
seconds. Yeah, 15 seconds in the first, no, answer 95% in the first 20 seconds and 85% in the first 15 seconds.
Okay.
And so we're meeting standards across the board on our emergency calls. So when we go towards accreditation, which we're gonna hit the 8th accreditation with EMD, and then we're gonna look towards a either a CALIA accreditation down the road or an APCO accreditation, but those standards are held nationally.
So when it says decreased 11.66, that's the wait times getting shorter.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Do you track, I assume you track it every year,
Oh,
up and down? I mean, can you talk about the longer trend
So we,
picture?
yeah, we had it's all due to staffing.
Yeah.
So, we had a couple of rough years during COVID, and then actually the year after COVID was probably the hardest year for us in our staffing. We were at times at 29 or 28 or 29 call receivers, which is just 50%. We were doing better than most of the folks in the state, so we tried not to complain too much.
But we were seeing that across,
100%.
yeah, everywhere. I mean, it
100%.
wasn't just here.
So we had longer wait times. The other thing that we see at times, like in the summertime, as Kim mentioned, when there's a large fire or a significant event that takes place, we get multiple calls. And so you're trying to field all of those calls, people end up waiting a little bit longer. I will throw out that a lot of the misperception out there is that we put people on hold. We don't put anybody on hold. What they're hearing is please stay on the line, so that if we've got long wait times trying to answer and we're trying to get through as quickly as possible, you'll hear a voice that says, please stay on the line, and don't hang up, because you end up going to the bottom of the queue at that point. So that's a lot of the feedback that we hear often is, I was put on hold. We asked you to wait so that we can get to it.
Yeah, and there are times where they will be put on hold, but the bulk of the triage is already completed. So the emergency details are already obtained, that's already put into CAD and it's sent over to dispatch. So at that point, if there's still more that they need to give or more information that they need to supply, but we've already obtained the bulk of it to give it to law enforcement to dispatch on it, then we will ask them to be on hold if no more 911 calls are ringing in. And crime check can be asked to be held at that point, just based on emergency calls coming in.
So moving on, this was our 5-year anniversary this past July. So we are, I think, officially no longer able to call ourselves a new center. I think we've put our time in at this point. We've been able to accomplish a lot in the past 5 years. Again, we have 21 out of 22 of our public safety agencies in Spokane that we serve. We are consistently trying to improve all of our services to meet the needs of our fire and police departments. One of the great things that we were able to do for our fire agencies the past few years is that because of the work that we've put in and our staffing levels and the way that we've started handling calls, we've seen fire insurance ratings go up significantly, or actually down significantly, which is what they want to see. And a lot of that is being attributed to us, which we are happy to serve and be able to provide that for them. So I know places like Cheney went down 2 points. That's a direct impact to our citizens. And so that's one thing that we want to make sure that we're consistently doing, is finding ways that we can help them afford what they need to afford. Our average hands to chest response time is 57 seconds. That helped to contribute to the Spokane Valley 2022 Heart Safety Award for their community. They actually gave us a really nice shout out about how it starts with us and it ends with them, and that relationship is what kind of helped to get that. Consistently working on process improvement. We have created an app. If you don't have the Shrek 911 app, it's available on Google Play and Apple, anywhere you choose. Please download today. It's a great app though. It's a great place for people to go for resources like online reporting if they have questions about crime check or just about 911 services, or there's a frequently asked questions part there. We also put our evacuation process that we do, and any evacuation notices are there. So it's kind of a one-stop shop for people to be able to go to, and we'll consistently update that and add what we believe people want to see. We launched EMD during this time. So that was one of our first accomplishments, was the emergency medical dispatch, so that there's consistency in our medical call taking. And based off of our feedback, we double staffed our 911, or not our 911, our crime check, to be able to meet the needs better. And again, we're extremely proud of our fiscal responsibility and what we've been able to accomplish the last few years in number one, leading our region in a new computer aided dispatch system. This will be the first time that both law and fire will be on one system, which is going to save a lot of misinformation and help with operations significantly, and hopefully help them communicate better on those scenes that are a consolidated law and fire effort. And again, we're looking forward to our new building. I'm excited to show you guys that slide because it's going to be a great opportunity for our staffs. We'll finally have the room we need to be able to do all of our hopes and dreams will be able to be met there, hopefully.
It'll just be magic.
Yes, it will be magical. And then the last thing I'll point out is that we have received both local, state, and national awards the last few years for our staff and the work that they do. So we're extremely proud of them. That is them and their dedication to this profession. And it's been a really great honor to be able to see them being recognized and be able to put that out there for them. So, right, next slide. So Kim kind of mentioned this, so I'll just kind of briefly go over it. The new staffing model launched for Crime Check. So we received a lot of feedback about the frustration people had with us calling back on those Crime Check calls. We went to our board a year ago and said, hey, this is our plan. We would like to add 24/7 service. We need to add, basically, we need to double our staffing to be able to accomplish that so that we can consistently take those reports. They agreed, and we went ahead and launched that in February of this year. Along with that, what we have done is we've created a survey that we send out in an email along with some information about here's what your next steps are and here's the local numbers you want to call. And in that survey, we've been getting some really great feedback, and we've made some changes based on that feedback. So we'll continue to provide that survey. But you can see on that bottom part of the slide, the survey measures 4 key areas of satisfaction. The time to answer call. So 87.7% are satisfied or very satisfied with that. Report taking process, 89.4% satisfied or very satisfied. The customer service, or the service that our employees provide, was an 87.4% satisfied or very satisfied. And then the awareness of next steps is at 58.3%, and that is up from 40%. Again, we've made some changes and we email them back and send some more information. A lot of what we're trying to do with the what happens next is work with our law partners on what can we tell them? What do you want us to share with them on what will happen with the report when it's done? So this, for us, when we look at these 4 key areas, that's what we can control. So as far as Crime Check goes, that's what we have the power to do anything about. So we're going to do everything we can. Basically, past that point, it goes to our law partners for them to meet the needs of the citizens. Any questions on that? You know, Crime Check's always a really fun topic for everyone. All right, next slide. So based on some of this feedback, we've also created dashboards for our law and fire agencies where they can get a good idea of kind of what's happening in their area. They can customize this with us. They can come to us and say, hey, I want to see more of this and less of this. But our intent in doing this is just, we collect a lot of data. Let us share that data with you so that you can do what you need to do in your area. So we just started doing this. It's, I think, been helpful for them. And we'll continue to finite that as we move forward. Right, next slide. And then, as I mentioned, we're in the process of our new computer aided dispatch system. We made the selection a year ago of Hexagon. We went through a pretty rigorous process to get to that point because we wanted to make sure both our law and fire partners were going to be happy with our choice. It is a newer piece of technology. Hexagon has been around a long time, but their new platform is called OnCall, and there's only a few that have got it around the state. So we're kind of on the bleeding edge of that with this new piece of technology, but we're really looking forward to it. We've got a really great staff that Hexagon has actually been very impressed with and given us a lot of really nice comments to be able to build and create this new CAD system that will combine both by fire and law into one. So, and every stakeholder is involved in that. Currently, we're also working with Spokane Police Department to work on that so that everyone in the area, public safety wise, will be working off of one platform. So, and we're expected to go live with that in October of 2025. We're still on track to do that. So now that I've said that, see. All right, any questions on our CAD?
So I'm just gonna ask, so if the city of Spokane doesn't come over to Shrek, so will they be on that platform or?
They will not unless they choose to pay into it. So it's the regionalized CAD system. If they choose not to be a part of the regionalized system, they'll need to determine what they want to do from there.
So they could do their own,
yeah,
they could pick a different CAD or any of that. Well, 911 still, well, yeah, I guess, well, they'd be geofence, so, okay.
They would be their own.
Thank you.
So, as one of those that actually campaigned to try and get the funding for, not only building the infrastructure, but also, the service you're providing, I just want to compliment you on the quality of service you're providing to the community. You've, met every one of my expectations and, really appreciate all the hard work you're doing. I know that it's a very, very, very stressful job. And, so attrition is a big factor, but, really do appreciate everything that you're doing and stuff and don't compromise. You're doing a great job and our community is safer because of it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We love what we do. Makes it fun.
Yeah.
All right, next slide. One more plug for our app. Download it today, please. There it is. She's a beauty. Look at that. Okay, next slide. All right, what we've all been waiting for, the new facility. So the new facility is located in Spokane Valley at 12809 East Marabou Parkway. So it's in the Pinecroft Business Park. It was originally an IT building. It was built for a company called Next IT. When we were looking at the facility out in the sheriff's office, we were running into some issues because of the zoning and the amount of space that we would be able to have on there. So we just started to we could have made it work, but we started to take a look to see if there was anything that would meet our needs. This happened to be there. It has been vacant for a couple of years. It was built in 2015. We walked through it and thought this will be a perfect place for us. So it's approximately 44,000 square feet. There's 250 parking spots there, which is going to be so nice compared to what we have right now. And it's got a lot of open area, open space for us to be able to put both operations administration. And another key thing that we're looking forward to is we're going to be able to co-locate our radio shop. So the piece of work that's across town right now will be able to be in one place for us. Additionally, it's going to be a one-stop shop for our public safety partners so that they need to get a radio fix, they need to talk to dispatch about a recording, things like that. It's all in one place for them to go to. So we did pass the PRC at the end of September. So that was a fun experience for me. But we're going to be doing an alternative build design, which we're also excited for. It's a really good opportunity for us just because of the type of work we do and the amount of technology that's required of it. It's a great use of the alternative build style. We're in our due diligence process, so we're making sure that there's no big hangups for us or something that we weren't aware of. Right now, we're feeling very confident, very good about it, and we anticipate closing mid-December. We had the RFQ out for the contractors and architects a couple weeks ago, and we'll be reviewing those on Friday and then starting that process and hope to start breaking ground in maybe spring of this year or summer. So again, our goal is to have a 30 to 40 year facility. It's large enough for us to be able to build up and build into. And it's an excellent location for our employees. Right now, we don't have a whole lot around us. We're right next to SCC. Going out to the sheriff's office, there wasn't going to be a lot around us, but we have a park, we have access to a trail, we're near a lot of shopping centers, things like that. So our employees on post have amenities and places to go to and nice areas for them to be able to kind of de-stress after a long day. So
The location, I think, is going to be a great location. It's fairly central, and so people from the valley aren't, going all the way out to the West Plains, and with the Centennial Trail right there, it's going to be really nice because it is a stressful job, and I think having the ability to have that break will be really nice.
And one of the other great benefits too is it's got a lot of different access points for us, and that was important. That's going to help us also get our accreditation because we need to be able to get into different various areas. So you go Trent, I-90, Pines, all of those places to get you where you need to go. So we're looking forward to that. And I have Google stairs. That's a picture up there. There's really cool wood Google stairs that look like bleachers. Any questions on our facility?
I did have, and Commissioner District 3 really does have it all. Now it
Yeah.
is, but, so you had talked about security for the building and you had to upgrade the window. Does the property itself, is it gonna have to be fenced? I know the current, okay, I was gonna say, I know the current facility, I mean, you go through a whole maze of fences before you get to where your property, so you will have to fence the property too.
Yeah, we'll have to fence the employee area, and then our radio shop will be back where where that is as well, but we'll have a lot of access for public entrance and public parking. But we'll put fences on both sides of the building that will be for our employees area.
Are you suggesting that to keep non-District 3 people
No,
out?
no, I was just, I was just wondering, I know the, you know, I know what, last time I was out at your current location, you had talked about, you know, several, you know, security upgrades to the building, so I wasn't sure how extensive those have to go, but I know the current facility, yeah, I mean, several gates can be closed to, you know, that lead up to the current location, so.
Yeah, and in this building, there's a lot of different entrances that'll have to have double access entry, so there's a lot of work that'll go into that to make sure that it's secure, but
Okay,
we'll still be locked down.
okay.
And just because I haven't been out to the current building, can you just kind of recap the size, the main issue? Did you look at, is that retrofittable to make it meet your needs? Just curious that thought process,
So-
not having seen it.
Yeah, so it's not retrofittable, with the exception of we could take down some walls, but it's about 22,000 square feet, but there's a huge data center in the middle of it that kind of takes up a big chunk of that space. It's also got a very small administration area, so we've kind of doubled people up in cubicles. You're getting to know your work partners very well right now. It's on all sides of it. We don't own the property. If we wanted to go out further, we would have to take over either some of Spokane Fire Department's training area, the National Guard's on the other side. And then on the other side of that is the Trains Spokane Community College. I think the other thing that's really important to note about our current facility is we had a study done in 2020 from AdCom. They're actually the same ones that just did the study for the city of Spokane. And what they informed us of is that it's not a really good location for a 911 center. We are right down from the dam, the Avista Dam. So if it were to break, we would be likely underwater. We're in a flight path from Phelps Field. There's a train that goes that carries crude oil and other hazardous materials right above us, and we're just right next to the new section of the north-south freeway. And so again, you're gonna have semis, things like that. So we're also downwind from a rendering plant, which I like to point out is not a very fun smell at times. So it's just not a great location for us to be at as far as safety goes and security. And we can't go up because of the flight path, so it's kind of stuck in what we are. We could try to, we've done significant change. We've made significant changes within the building over the last couple of years to just try to make it work for us. But it was meant to be a 20-year building. It was built in 2003, 2004, and it lasted 20 years, so.
Well, and if the city doesn't come on board, then it's kind of awkward that we're in a city-owned building and the city's not part of the partnership. Yeah.
Any other questions on the facility?
No, I was just gonna say, I'm glad you're able to find something because I'm sure that's gonna bring down the total cost.
Okay.
And so that's exciting to, whenever you can realistically retrofit rather than build from the ground up, I would think we're saving some money, so
Yeah.
that's good.
Yeah, we're saving anywhere from 10 to 15 million by doing this. So again, this was a fantastic find for us. It kind of came out of nowhere and we were like, yep, this is gonna work. It's gonna be perfect. Let's hope we can get it. So, and the business park that we're in, the folks, we've met with them a couple of times, they're very nice. They're excited to have us there as well. We bring a level of security, I think, with public safety in and out.
There'll be a lot of
Yeah.
folks coming in and out.
Yeah, they're
Keep
gonna
an eye
look
on
forward to
things.
that, so.
I just had a question about the user fees that when we pay as the county, where do those just come out of our general funds? Okay. So most of the jurisdictions pay their user fees out of their general funds. Okay, because on the slide, when you talk about which things are funded from taxes or not, I think it would probably be more accurate to say that the user fees are paid out of taxes. They're just taxes paid to each of the jurisdictions.
Yeah.
So anyway, just to clarify.
Yep.
Pretty much it's all
Tax-based.
tax funded. And what is our user fee this year?
We also pay user fees for all jurisdictions that contract with the sheriff's office.
Okay.
So
it's a
ours,
little
so yes, so it's a
convoluted.
little muddied. But it's around $3.5 million, I think.
And we'll move away from that once we're on CAD, the new CAD system, then those would be just direct billings. Right now, CAD is owned by the county. We have the contract with the vendor. We do all the billings for the various law enforcement agencies except for City of Spokane. So when Shrek takes over the new CAD system, they'll be in a situation where they'll have all the stats and all that stuff out. So it's an administrative obligation to the county.
Any other questions? All right, our next slide is just our ACE accreditation. Kim talked about that a little bit. Again, this is something that we've been working towards. It's something that we're gonna look forward to for our employees, for our center, and also for our partners. It's just a kind of a stamp of approval that we are taking our medical calls, we are taking them seriously, we're doing exactly what we should be doing with them and meeting national standards with that, actually international standards. Any other questions for me? I think my last slide is thank you and questions.
Any last questions for Lori? Well, I will just say, I've kind of been along with the process, I know. So is Josh now, but I think in 5 years, you guys have done pretty amazing work. Bringing the call times down, just all of that and seeing all the jurisdictions that initially were part of it come on board. Say thank you for all the hard work that you guys are doing. I know it's not easy. So just appreciate everything.
Yeah, we'll pass that along to our employees. Thank you. Yeah.
So just remembering a little bit about the report that the city contracted for. One part of that said that our reserves are too high and that we should be relying more on debt to finance the expansion and stuff. And so I was a little surprised by that because debt is usually something government wants to avoid because our folks pay taxes for services. They don't pay taxes to service debt and stuff. So I just, I didn't go through the whole report, but I got to that point and said, these guys, well, anyway, I won't tell you what anyway, kudos to you for trying to reduce the amount of debt that you're going to be incurring, and with the acquisition of the new building and everything, it looks like you're on the right path. So thank you.
Yeah, and we'll be coming back to ask for money at a time if we end up going into debt, as you guys are the ones that will take out that debt for us.
Yeah.
So we'll keep you aware of what's happening between Scott and myself and let you know if we need anything.
Yeah, I think, sometimes there is a place, and I'm thinking of when Scott and I were at the City of Spokane, looking at double-digit increases in utility fees for residents for like 5-6 years to pay for all the stormwater overflow tanks and all of the work to clean up the river. And we did make a strategic decision to take out debt rather than knowing that it would put a really big burden to have increasing fees. And thinking about that the use of this system is not just today or the next 5 years, but for 20 years. So I think, sometimes philosophically, I agree that the least amount of interest that people have to pay. But sometimes it makes sense if you're trying to make sure the burden isn't just on, the current users, but the future as well for the use of the system and the building and everything. So.
Can I ask, was that a situation? I assume you didn't have the money sitting in a reserve account to cash fund all that, right?
Yeah,
So
there
it's
was
kind of two different
things.
kind of apples and oranges on that.
There was, it was kind of looking at long-term, trying to have predictable and reliable utility rates. So you could do 20% increase 1 year for the next bump, and then it has just wild swings on your citizens who are paying for the stuff. So there was a choice to go out for debt, which then kind of level set. And because you're investing in capital over 20 years, it made sense to go out with debt. This one here, I think with Shrek, having the ability to set dollars aside for a period of time, it won't fully fund all the capital needs. There's probably 7 to 10 maybe. The equipment is very expensive, so it's very likely that Shrek will be short some to fulfill the capital. which is what Lori just referred to, likely having to come back. The Shrek doesn't have the ability in their charter to take on debt. Only the county can obligate debt on their behalf. So there's probably gonna be some, and that allows an opportunity to smooth out some user fees over some time versus everyone, all the users coming in and buying an $8 million check. We could possibly take on some debt, and now it's maybe $1 million a year over 10 years. Just throwing some numbers out.
I just know that from STA standpoint, we fund a reserve and expectation of having to make those capital expenditures. And so if you're budgeting appropriately so that you're not only meeting your expenses, but you're actually funding for your future expenses in terms of capital outlay, you avoid debt. And when revenues are slow, you want to provide service, you don't want to be providing debt services. So that's one of the reasons why, we try and budget for capital outlays so that we've got the money when we need to do that, be able to spend it. And can avoid that and stuff. So it's just, how are you going to spend taxpayer money? And how are you going to budget appropriately? So that was my point, is that we built up the reserves to be able to avoid or minimize the amount of debt that we have to take on, which means that we can provide service, especially when times are slow.
Yes, you always have to look at the interest rates and what's going on with the bond market and everything else.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Appreciate it. Okay, so we are getting beyond time, so we're gonna start to keep minutes. Megan, how are you doing?
I'm great. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Know how to clear a room out.
See, look at how this
Yeah.
works. Thank you for hanging with us. And
Sure.
Ashley's here as well, so we'll try to keep it.
Yeah, and I just have a couple of slides. Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate the invitation to come and talk a little bit about the interlocal agreement. We're sort of asking to expand it again. I'm Megan Duval, for anybody that doesn't know me, Historic Preservation Officer for the city and the county. We have been partners since 1982, the city and the county. Really, these programs started together. And so we've always shared a landmarks commission. We have 19 Spokane County, so that's unincorporated county individually listed properties on the Spokane Register. And we can go to the next slide. There we go. 55 heritage barns have been listed for the state, which is really exciting. I also did contact the Washington Trust for Historic Preservation, who runs the courthouse and the barn grant programs. There's been 9 barns that have received state money for rehab of their barns, totaling about $250,000 since the program started. So that's kind of exciting. Just wanted to share that with you. Next slide. So the interlocal agreements, small Spokane County cities. I know this is something that we were asked to do, and we've sure tried. We did get Fairfield to join as an interlocal in 2016. And I will say that a lesson was learned with Fairfield is you can't just go in and do an interlocal agreement with a small town and then let them just kind of leave them to their own devices to like try to get something listed or whatever. So next slide, we've changed our tactic. And so with our new community Medical Lake, which just joined us as an interlocal this year, we asked for a grant program or a grant immediately from the state, which we received. And we're basically going to do kind of a context and overall history of Medical Lake, and then make it a lot easier for property owners in Medical Lake to list their properties. They don't have to do as extensive as research. And we're actually going to list one property to start things off with that grant. So that's kind of exciting. And that's how we will tackle new interlocal agreements with communities. I did get a call.
Is there any way to go back to Fairfield and?
Yeah, I think we will. I think we will look at that. Absolutely. And of course, we do require owner consent for listing. So you have to find somebody that wants to, but I think we would be able to do that. And I think we will. We will do that. I think it's a great idea. I did get a call just a few days ago from Millwood. Millwood has their own certified local government. They have their own historic preservation commission, but they've really never had staff. And so they're basically their contract staff person who does their planning called and said, I was speaking with the mayor and the mayor said they might want to just do an interlocal agreement with the county. And I said, okay, that would mean you'd have to give up your own commission and use the county's commission. And so anyway, so that conversation started, so we may have another on the horizon. Next slide. We've asked for grants and received grants for the county in the past several years. So since I've been here, 2014, we did the native stone survey, which was basically a look at all the different rock structures and stuff around the county and kind of talked about that. And we have a presence on our website. And I look at that and I think, what a quaint little amount that was, $12,000, you know, back in, I think it was 2015 that we did that, or 2016. Next slide. Then we did the monuments and markers study, which we just completed about 2 years ago. We got 16,000 for that. We did this one in-house. Now that we have 2 staff people, we actually ask for grants every year. And then the historic preservation specialist, Logan Camporeale, tends to be the one that then does that research and the project, which is really cool, because then it's a little bit, you know, it's some funding that we get, that the city makes sure we put in our budget every year. So we kind of have to get that grant. We've been successful every single year. We've never been rejected. So that's good. And next slide. And then, as I mentioned, the medical lake context that we're doing. So that's $16,300 that we received, and that started October 1. So that will conclude at the end of August next year. Next slide. And so I think something that gets lost is how much economic development historic preservation actually is. I often say, you know, I would be more than happy to put my incentive next to any other incentive at the city or the county in terms of the economic impact that we have. Since 2000, our special tax valuation, so that in a nutshell is when somebody improves their property, we give them a 10-year property tax reduction based on how much they spend. So it reduces their overall valuation of the property. I think 314 million, almost 315 million is a pretty big number. I mean, that's like, you know, that's over $250 million. That's a lot of money that's invested in our historic properties. So just in the last 5 years, over $107 million spent on 66 projects. So those are just really, I think, big numbers. Also, I like to tell folks, especially you who understand these incentives, the multifamily tax exemption for new housing, which is a great program, that is actually tax money that does not come into the county. And I think the important thing to know for special valuation is it is a slight tax shift. I worked with Jim Havermill last year on, I asked him, how much does this actually cost everybody else in the county when we're giving tax breaks to folks that improve historic properties? And he was so good. He must really be a numbers wonk, because it basically came back to like $4.65 for an average property in Spokane County, which is like 400,000. That's how much more people pay in order to keep these historic properties in use and basically give folks a reason to make these properties pencil out. That's the kind of tax shift. So I don't want people to think, oh, I'm paying $1,000 more a year because a rich person got a special valuation tax break. At the end of the 10 years, they're now paying on a fully improved property. So the next slide shows just kind of a snapshot. This is, I know these numbers are a little bit small. I actually can't read them. But I track what the amount of rehabilitation, obviously, but I also track the pre-assessed value of that property and then the post, this one particular one is 5 years after. And what the valuation is. And you can see this is an 82% increase in the property values. If nothing had happened with those, that's 82% less money that the county gets toward that. So I just kind of wanted to explain that this really is an economic development driver as well as being cultural and historic. We can go to the next slide. And this is just a recent county property, oh, barely county, but county, literally on the corner of the county and the city. This is the Minocqua Clear House, a beautiful mid-century modern house. You know, the pre-assessed value was 432,000. That's just the house itself. They invested over $560,000 into improvements. And now the assessed value of that, just the house is 833,000. So just so you can kind of see it in real time. Next slide. So now I have to tell you what I'm asking for. And I know Scott is probably like, Megan, I told you we weren't gonna fund that $50,000 increase, but I thought I might as well just come to you and ask. We have been staying at 40,000 a year since basically pre-COVID. We didn't ask for an increase in that money during COVID. I think that was from 2019 or 2020 to 2023. Maybe it's 2021 to 2024, since we're ending this year. So we were hoping that maybe we could have kind of that catch-up year to get us up to 50,000. And then a modest increase every year of just the 2.5%, which we looked at, you know, the sort of some averages of interest over the last couple of years, but of course we had a great big year of 8% interest, and that seemed kind of skewed. Talked to Commissioner French, he felt more comfortable with the 2.5, so we went with 2.5. So anyway, this is just really the only changes we're asking for is a little bit of a bump in our funding. And then just some basic housekeeping measures. One is to have this be a 5-year agreement rather than a 3-year agreement. And, you know, we have this language in it that says something about a grant program report. We see this as an interlocal where we are actually providing a service and not really a grant program. So those are the only things we asked for. And then the last slide is I wanted to tell you what the plan is. If we get this bump in funding, is that we will commit to scheduling a series of workshops at the Spokane County Library to talk to historic property owners about special valuation preservation efforts in the county. One of our landmarks commissioners right now, our county at large representative, actually works for the Spokane County Library. So I think we have it in there to be able to get on to book some rooms. Create a video to promote the special valuation incentive specifically to more rural types of properties and small towns. And also, I would like us to visit every small community in the county with a population of 5,000 or less to present on an interlocal agreement with them. So those are our plans. And remember, we have two employees. So, you know, we also have about 2,000 properties individually listed on the Spokane Register. So we have a lot of work that we do, but we would commit to doing this. And I think that's the end, my last slide. One more slide is just questions. Happy to entertain any questions.
So I guess one question is like, so your request is, because we're in an agreement right now.
Yes, this is it ends at the end of December, right?
This funding comes out of the general fund.
Historic preservation. That's the ones that
Oh,
we
it is the
get.
1386 money.
We get doc reporting fees from the auditor's office for it.
That's actually good for me. I did not realize that was where we were funded. That's good to know. Reporting fees, yeah.
Recording,
yeah.
not.
Thanks so much. I appreciate
I
it.
appreciate all the information on the valuation.
Yeah,
I didn't really know about how that worked itself out.
yes,
So, I mean, it makes sense. You have
Yes.
to do upgrades to the home to get it to a certain state.
exactly. And that's, and really, they've protected the property by putting it on the Spokane Register of Historic Places. You know, it will be around it's on in perpetuity. So the fact that then they're improving it, that's how the incentive works, is that you're not actually giving a gift of public funds to
Right,
somebody,
right.
they're improving it and it'll be around for the next 100 years, and it's important historically too. So,
Thank you.
yeah, sure, absolutely. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, appreciate it. Okay, that's then gonna take us to Ashley. Please rotate chairs.
Yeah.
There, good morning. Ashley Blake from Spokane Sports, joined by my colleague.
Jason Campbell.
So here today, to talk about the retail rental car tax. So the mission at Spokane Sports is simple. We are focused on bringing in major sporting events to Spokane County, all with the intent of ensuring that our region is strong. So we kind of look at this as 4 key areas. That first one is hosting and creating major sporting events. That's events like the USA Volleyball, Pacific Northwest Qualifier. That brings in 15,000 girls and their families. Just Spokane to compete every year. That's also events like the NCAA Indoor Track Championships, which garner national attention, which we just won the rights to host. So that's really our bread and butter pillar. The next one is sports facility advocacy. We have a really strong relationship with the Public Facilities District. We serve as the sports, sales, marketing, game day management arm for the podium. And we also just broke ground on our next sports facility, which is the Future Cross Course in the Valley. And then the other 2 segments are regional events. So those are events like ensuring our officials pools are strong, it's high performance, camps and clinics and market. And that last pillar is community engagement. So that's events like our Inland Northwest Hall of Fame and our Spokane Youth Sports Awards. Next slide, please. So our team, we have 11 full-time employees really focused on the technical delivery of sporting events in particular. Next slide. So when you look at our unique contribution, truthfully, there's not a lot of leads inbound. This is our team out in the marketplace, out in the national space, building relationships with sport governing bodies, with decision makers. And really the niche that helps us stand out among other marketplaces is our ability to deliver events. So really our specialty is that technical delivery. It's everything from working with our facilities, our hotels, hospitality, transportation, all of those elements that it takes to put on a national championship or a world championship. Next slide, please. So our strategies and kind of where you see this show up in our community, that first one is driving economic growth. We just had our impact study back from 2023, and that was $86 million in direct economic impact for the market. Boosting hotel occupancy, this varies year to year. We're sitting at about 50,000 hotel room nights generated for this year. It's maximizing facility usage, so it's ensuring facilities like the podium are fully programmed and operating through our efforts. Next slide, please. And then when you look at our budget, you'll see the retail rental car tax is number 3. That's been a very important funding source for us over the last 25 years. That sits only behind our regional TPA and our Spokane Valley TPA. So those are our tourism promotion area dollars, which are assessments collected on the back of hotels. Next slide, please. And then when you look at it on the expense side, we are spending over $1 million a year on those direct event commitments. So those are all of the costs associated with putting on really high level events. And behind that, you'll see our marketing and sales support. So that's us positioning Spokane County as a really viable place for hosting events. And when you look at our program efficiency, we sit about 77%. So that's about 12% higher than what other nonprofits do as far as efficiency with our return on investment. Next slide, please. And then just kind of a recap of where we're at for 2024. We've supported 56 different sporting events across Spokane County. It's been key facilities, including the podium, powered by SDCU, the convention center, the arena, Dwight Merkle, but then we also have events this year in 32 different facilities across the county. So sometimes that's golf courses, sometimes that's the hub out in Liberty Lake. So very kind of diverse terrain, although our focus really to date has been on the podium. When you're looking at direct impact on transportation and the retail rental car tax, our study came back and showed that we're delivering about $6.1 million in direct impact on transportation. That's across rental cars, gas, taxis, parking, public transportation. Really just a boost for our economy. That's really a figure that we're proud of. In a typical year, we're welcoming between 100 and 150,000 people to our market. These are people that come in and they're here to coach, to officiate, to spectate, to really induce some new revenue into our economy that wouldn't be here if it wasn't for our efforts. So they're spending money on retail, in our parks, they're shopping, they're in our hotels, they're drinking. It's all of those new dollars to our economy that wouldn't be possible without sports tourism efforts. Next slide, please. And then bringing us to our next tourism asset. On October 16th, we broke ground on the future cross course in Spokane Valley. And today, so we've already secured 4 championships for this site. Timeframe, we're looking at opening in 2025 for our preview season, because we're pretty late in that competition window. And then looking at 2026 for our championship season. We have about 65% of the funding raised for that for phase 1. Which is really kind of the core component, which is the course itself, what athletes will be competing on. And then we have phase 2 and 3 broken down into a field house and then betterments for the site, which would be those things that put us kind of above and beyond and make us really competitive around the national space. Next slide, please. So today we're hoping to renew our contract in 2025. Looking at our previous contracts, they had been 5-year agreements. So we'd love to have some dialogue about a multi-year commitment. And then additional considerations as you're looking at how to allocate the retail rental car tax. Know that we have a really major responsibility at the podium, and we're a key catalyst for that facility. And phase 1 of the construction of the cross course is underway, and hoping that would be a consideration as well.
Great job. Any questions? Commissioner French.
So the one time you had me down there and stuff, it was a great event.
Yes.
Thank you for allowing me to participate. Allowing for, setup and breakdown and all that kind of stuff between events and stuff, which is obviously required. Out of the total capacity that you have for events, where do you think you're at? I mean, you're 70%, 80%, 100%? And how much more capacity is there in the facility, the podium specifically? And how do you anticipate filling in that additional capacity? Are there other events? Are there other activities that you can go after that would, you'll never get to 100%, but, maximize out the capacity of the facility?
Yeah, so this year we have 76 competition days at the podium. That's actually surpassing what our feasibility report said we were going to do at the 5-year mark. So we're a few years ahead of where we should be. So very, very proud of that. But really our limitation is not getting more events. There's a lot of viable events that we could go after. Our cap has been funding. So there's a lot more opportunities to bring in additional events or create additional events. We haven't always had the bandwidth to be able to support those. So one element that our operations team is proud of this year is that we have every weekend booked from January until the middle of May. And then really the next effort, and then we switch and they're hosting high school graduations and concerts. And then the next focus is the summer and then fall, which is typically a slower season for sports. But really our limiter is the funding component rather than the events themselves.
So do you get any revenue from the tourism promotion fund?
Yeah, so
They are investing in you as well.
about 34% of the regional tourism promotion dollars come to Spokane Sports, and then about $400,000 from the Spokane Valley tourism promotion area to Spokane Sports.
Thank you.
Pull that slide back up.
I miss it.
Yes.
Oh.
It was tiny font though. It was small, but yeah, I think it helps to show. Chris?
Thank you for this and exciting work that you guys do.
Thank you.
just wondering, on an annual basis, what's the total revenue and total expenses? Then do you keep any operation reserve over the years?
$3.2 million this year.
About 3.5 million, yeah. We try to build a reserve, but we have a small budget and our team has grown significantly in the last year, so we have some work to do there, but pretty much every dollar we get spent.
Same question.
Amber.
Oh, okay. Well, thanks. This is great. I really appreciate the overview. How do you get your figures and how do you differentiate those from like other events? You just look at the actual bodies for the events that you guys, like you said, 56 events supported. So the numbers that we see here, the visitors, the bed nights, hotel nights, that's all for just those 56 events.
Yeah, so
And
that's
no one else is like counting those, or they may count them towards their larger numbers. Like Visit Spokane may include that in the larger number, but this is the subset just for what you guys do.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, so this is that 56 events are events that we are solely responsible for bringing to town and delivering. We do have a small portion of our budget, about 80 grand, supports our kind of up and coming events. So events like middle school basketball championships that started as a small local tournament, but we see them as something that was going to grow and scale. And it has, like now there's 620 teams over 2 weekends for that tournament. So in short, all the events that we report on are events that we're directly responsible for. And we do have a Tourism Economics as a third party that came in and validated all of our figures this year. So they geofenced the podium, they looked at our ticketing data, they looked at our athlete registration and hotel occupancy and validated all those figures.
So what are some of the biggest, so to what Commissioner French, following up on his questions, some of the biggest barriers then are just to bring in more events is you gotta have money to fund those events, even though then the money comes back to the community through sales tax and you know, all the other hotel, motel tax. But you need those upfront dollars is what you're saying to then invest in the event.
And in people also, I mean, the funding would help us hire more people to support some, expanding our event catalog, but yeah, that would be the main barrier to
Do you have to provide your own staff to do the actual switching, or does the podium have staff? How does that work? When you're working at a facility like the convention center or the podium, do you
Yeah.
partner with their staff to do the setup and tear down and all of that?
It depends. So the podium manages the major facility conversion. So if we're moving from like indoor track and field to basketball, that's an effort that's managed on their side. Where we really focus is on in the field of play. So for like an indoor track championship, for example, we run a crew of about 200 people on event day. That's our staff, that's our officials, that's our hospitality, that's like all of the efforts to logistically run. So we talk about things like in the field of play and outside of the field of play. But yeah, it's a significant effort and we're always looking for volunteers. You're raising your hand.
Yes. Well, I look for it and I just personally, I've seen since the pandemic with my own daughter and her sports, every year you're adding more events, which is just excellent. I remember there was one indoor track event. Now there's like 5 for high schoolers, I think, on the calendar.
Yep.
And so it's just like the growth is great. And so congratulations on that. But it's great because she's part of a local track, club, and you get the club members to come in and they help out and then they get a little bit of money to help with the club. And so, I think those are great efforts to get people involved and you get a few more hands because there's a lot that goes on with volleyball meets and track and yeah.
Actually kind of goes in line with what Commissioner Waldron was talking about. Can you touch on sort of what your FTE count has looked like over the last couple of years? Because I know you've referenced hiring new folks. I mean, what was sort of the low number and where are you at now?
from 5 to 11 over the last year.
Okay. 5 to 11.
A lot of it has been the scaling, right? So having the right staff that we can be a sustainable organization to be scaling and hosting these type of events and continue attraction. And then also identifying some of those new spaces in the market, like noticing that there was a real need for a cross-country facility in our market and that we have that specialty on our staff with running and that technical component and starting those conversations with the valley, like having that substantial staff to be able to deliver on those promises.
Of all the different kind of venues that you offer inside the podium, now that you've been operational for a couple of years, what is the most profitable activity that you've seen at the podium?
So if you're looking at Spokane sports events specifically, we lose or we invest revenue on about 90% of our events. Our events do not turn a profit, but we really see the payday when the little mom and pop businesses stay open and coffee shops are filled and restaurants are full in January, and typically a low period for our market. So that's, I guess, helpful from that lens. But on the indoor track and field side, our created events, so like our high school invitationals and our collegiate invitationals, have the highest possibility of breaking even and turning revenue, because we get to design and set kind of the framework for those events, and we also get to solicit sponsorship dollars and then retain the athlete registration revenue as well as ticketing revenue for those events. So we're close to breaking even on some of those, and hopefully that's a possibility in the future.
Yeah, I know that that wasn't the original goal, is that you be self-sustaining. Like you say, you feed a lot of other businesses in the community. That's the success. But I was just wondering if there was some events that were more, that generate a greater return for you than others, just for a curiosity standpoint.
Yeah.
And I would assume that those that have the greatest attendance and or revenue generation are going to be those that are probably more winter oriented, fall, winter, spring kind of ideas.
Yeah, the indoor track, so our season this year will have 13 meets that will run within like a 24-day period. So it's like we have groups that are moving out, and then the next hour we have another group moving in to compete.
Yeah.
And we're seeing that there's, we're having to almost cap registration because there's such a demand and such a desire for those meets. And it's, you know, we're the only track on the West Coast. It's a premier, like it's a very, very nice facility. So being able to, you know, not just drive national tourism, but also give opportunities for our local community to come in and compete at different events has been a really, really powerful platform to have.
Also events like the Pacific Northwest Volleyball Qualifier, actually mentioned over 2 weekends that generated nearly 16,000 hotel stays.
Thank you.
And I guess my question, because I really don't know the governance structure of your organization, so who's like representative on the board, not people, but just what groups? I mean, I guess I don't know how that works.
Yeah, so Spokane Sports is a 501c3. We currently have 13 board members that serve as our governing structure. We have higher education, so we have Gonzaga University and UW represented. We have 3 hotel partners, limited service and full service properties. We have Avista represented, construction, architecture. We actually just did interviews and looking at adding sport industry specific to our board members as well.
And then just because like the podium is actually owned by the Public Facilities District, so I guess I'm curious as to the interaction and the workings between the two of you.
Yeah, Stephanie Curran also sits on our board. So essentially Spokane Sports is responsible for the sports segment at that facility. So all of the sports sales, marketing, and game day management. We assist in the cost recovery of that facility, and they really lean on us to do all of that programmatic scheduling. So working with their sales team to optimize the calendar, optimize the conversions from one sporting event to another. All of the marketing and positioning of that on the national stage is on our shoulders.
And we work closely with Visit Spokane as well and the PFD. and do joint strategic planning.
Yeah, and kind of going back to that question about Visit Spokane. Amazing organization, and they are really focused on the destination marketing. So where our team is really highly focused on the technical delivery of events. We lean on Visit Spokane to, communicate to our athletes and to our coaches, this is what you can do when you're in market and not competing. These are the best restaurants and these are the best attractions to see. So we really lean on them from that destination perspective.
Thank you. I think that just helps understand. Some of that. So. Any other questions?
Can I just ask about the cross country, like it looks like you've got it mostly funded.
Yes.
Do you have some outstanding asks at the state level, or how can we be helpful?
Yes, thank you for that question. So phase one construction is 7 million, and we're about 65% of the way funded on that. Actually headed to a meeting at noon to we have a $2.5 million request going in front of lodging tax to help us get very close to that phase one completion. Believe it's going to be on the federal agenda, 3.5 million for the field house. And so we're short a few dollars, especially on that phase one, and then on the betterments piece. And as we look at this is, we could fund this, over a 5 or a 10-year period, but the sooner that we can get this project fully funded and operationalized, the sooner we can deliver really high caliber of events and not have to spend some of our precious tourism promotion dollars on some of those attributes that we'd have to make up for, like bringing in porta potties, and versus having them permanently on the site. So our hope is to get that facility built and delivered as quickly as possible so we can have the highest impact for it.
What would the betterments be that you envision?
So that's things like the finish line for the facility. So having something that's like very iconic and representative of our region versus just Ashley and Jason holding the tape and, and having you run through. It's also things like putting, like for example, putting boulders, protecting the parking so we don't have any vandalism off the course like the night before an NCAA championship. So some of those features that we would have to make up for on the operational logistics side, and having those built-in construction be important.
And what are some of the events that you've been able to plan out so far?
Yeah, so thankfully, one of the beauties of this relationship is that we're not a new name into the event hosting space. So Spokane Sports has a reputation with decision makers like the NCAA and USA Track and Field. So we've been able to kind of leverage those relationships to ensure that when we open this facility, we have a great lineup. One that we're really proud of is the 2027 NCAA Division I regionals. They've selected Spokane to host that. We just won 3 years of the NWAC cross country championships. That's the conference that Spokane Community College runs in. So they've been a great partner to us. There's a lot of energy from Whitworth and Gonzaga and Eastern to partner with us to host collegiate invitationals. So I think similar to the podium, not only will we be bidding on events, but we'll also do quite a bit of event creation for that site.
Thank you very much. Did you have any? Nope. I think we've covered you with all the questions.
Okay, and then next steps from here, what does that look like?
So then we will be, as we put our budget together, we'll be determining how much is in our community section that will be portioning out. So we'll look at the rental car sales tax and see where that is. I think you guys had the discussion last week when I was gone, or 2 weeks ago. I don't know. I can't remember how long I've been gone. Was excelling bonds for the airport. So I think we'll be looking at that through that process of our budget process. So you should know, and that will get into our budget process. And you'll know by the end of the 1st to 4th of December, I think is when we're hoping to pass the budget.
Okay, thank you very much.
And then talking about a 5-year, we'll just have to talk about that as we look at that to see what that looks like.
So you're in the running.
We're in the running. Thank you.
Nice.
And I'll just say, I think in the past, I mean, I think part of the confusion was last time was in the past, didn't have the projects going that we have going within Spokane County that we can use some of those dollars for. So that's why I think in the past it was easier to just, you know, provide the funding to you. And so I think that's where we're looking at what with the new park campus out on the West Plains and with what we're trying to do at Plants Ferry. I mean, those are things that feed into exactly what you guys are looking for. If we can upgrade our fields out there, that gives you more opportunity to have, you know, tournaments and events, you know, that can utilize those fields. Just like with the hub putting in their new soccer fields. So, you know, so that's why we've got to look at the whole picture of it to make sure we're doing what we need to do.
Yeah, understood. Thank you very much. Yeah, we certainly believe that there's a lot of amazing opportunities for sports in this market, and certainly we just get those priorities as well.
Great. Thank you. Maybe you're gonna give us, Jason gonna come out and give us a sales tax update?
Yes.
We are.
Yeah.
They're gonna be good?
Yeah, she lives in the neighborhood.
Jason's giving it.
I will do my
best.
seems to follow Jason.
Before we jump into that, I just want to bring one thing to your attention. I was talking to Mr. Ignacio today. We are going to have a resolution on your agenda for tomorrow. When we did the resolution to set the property tax decisions on the 18th, we left off an option of using some bank capacity. So we will have a resolution tomorrow that adds that to the list of possibilities you have on the 18th. It will have to be by leave since it wasn't noticed, but Jim is preparing that right now. So apologize for, I forgot that option because it's going to be part of the presentation as an option, but right now I can't do that. So for example, conservation future, we did not take a 1% last year, a 1% this year is.
Making a decision.
No, that won't be until the 18th. This just gives us the ability to have that as an option when you make the decisions.
Right. So I guess I'm confused as to what's by leave.
The resolution to add that as an option, because that has to be out to the public by the 8th, has to be noticed 10 days prior. And
But he's got until 2 o'clock today to
Today.
just swap out what's on the agenda. If he
Yeah,
gets it done by
it's
2
24
o'clock,
hours.
then it's,
okay,
we can just take it on the normal Senate agenda.
okay.
By 2 o'clock today, so that way it's just on the
Okay,
agenda.
okay, perfect.
I want
Yes, I'm just,
I would be nice and not ask Matt at this long and check.
that's fine.
Not
That's,
taking notes.
that's perfect. Noted. That's perfect.
Gina's saying as long as she gets it by
Yes.
Okay,
2 o'clock.
okay.
get it.
We will have it by then, so
Seems
reasonable.
then it will just be replacing our consent agenda.
Right, but yeah, but hopefully we can just have it done, so yes, 'cause I was like.
We will make sure of that. So
I think we have to do that by leave.
now I'll let Jason do the fun stuff.
Oh, Jason.
All right.
Second,
Uh,
second, Jason. Commissioner Brent.
Sorry, I had too many Starbucks in me. So this downward trend with regard to the sales tax,
Yes,
He's not got there yet.
what's that?
Has he got
Yeah.
he's about to talk about it.
Oh, well then, I thought
Recently.
you'd already finished it. Okay,
No.
never mind. Well, I'm anxious to hear your comments.
we were waiting for you, Al.
Yeah, right.
We didn't want you to miss
Believe that.
We're thoughtful and caring.
So save your comments, so we'll let Jason
Alright.
start.
All right, the sales tax isn't great, but it's not terrible. We definitely are under budget. So sales tax for October collections are 6.8 million. Year to date, 64 million. So we're a little bit under budget. We're still over last year's numbers. We're about 300,000 over last year's. Year to date, we're about 0.5% over what last year's figures were, but we had budgeted 3%, so we are a little bit short. If you see on the bottom graph, the rolling 12-month is 0.3% for sales tax growth. Year over year. 8 out of the 12 months show negative growth. But it is flattening out a little bit. Commissioner French, you had a question about the,
Well, My only comment was that, when I'm at the door, there are a lot of people that are talking about financial stress. And, I've not experienced a time when people were so willing to talk about the financial pressures. And so, the only reason I mention it is, I worry about our Measure One. And I'm fearful that this is going to be a ballot season where they're voting their pocketbook. And the pocketbook has got a lot of moss in it. And so, that's the only reason. And this graph kind of confirms what I'm hearing at the door. So that's the only thing I wanted to share with you is that, it's not real pretty out there right now.
And also, and we'll talk about this more next week, but based on the trends we're seeing, are revising downward projected 2025 sales tax revenue.
Yeah.
Our jump off point, the way this year is going, I believe our 24 will likely equal our 23 collections. I think we'll be down to about a 0% increase. And so even if we build a 1% in, that is still a chunk of money coming out of next year's budgeted revenue. But we'll talk about that next week. So, yeah.
Next slide. So this slide we threw in, showed it several months ago. So DOR, the Department of Revenue, has their data on taxable sales. So not the collection amounts, not the amounts that the county or cities receive, but the actual activity. So going back to 2019, 15.5% of the taxable sales occurred in unincorporated Spokane County. And then right now we're trending at 16.9%. So it's an increase in the amount, the percentage of taxable sales where the activity is actually occurring. And then to give you like numbers for the year, for the past year, taxable sales for all the jurisdictions, including unincorporated, was about $15 billion, and 16.9% of which was generated within the unincorporated areas of the county.
16.5% of that is
16 point-
Costco. No, I'm just kidding.
Amazon.
Can you repeat those one more time? The total was what?
So for the past 4 quarters, taxable sales about 15 billion.
Countywide.
Countywide.
Okay. Thanks.
All jurisdictions. Next slide. Okay, so not a huge change. Retail trade still staying about flat, 0%, right about 0% growth. Construction is 7% below year over year, year to date, and food services are 4% below year over year, year to date. But a combination of construction is actually improving just a little bit, just not enough to change that color from red to yellow. And a combination of food services is starting to show a little bit of a bump up as well, even though it's still down year to date. So it's slight improvement. Next slide. So even though construction as an entire sector is showing a slight improvement, residential and non-residential building is still quite a bit lower than it was last year to date. So you see 37% below for non-residential and 3% below for residential. The architecture billing index shows 20 months of decline for billings, but it's going through some of their literature. They still seem pretty optimistic because there's still quite a backlog of projects that they can still work on. But their amount of billings is still decreasing.
Do you have the capability of generating kind of a heat map that shows where the different activities are occurring at, so that we can be sensitive to, okay, there's a lot of construction going on in this quadrant or this quadrant, and what is it that we need to be doing or not doing to either accommodate it or stay out of the way of it happening, kind of a deal.
I wonder if our GIS team may be able to do some sort of based on permit activity, maybe.
It's either permanent activity or sales tax activity that's related to construction. I mean, you do a great job of quantifying the construction, but it doesn't kind of tell us where the construction is happening that might help inform other decisions and stuff. I mean, if you can't, that's great. I mean, that's fine. I don't want to create work.
Commissioner French, I would say the issue from a sales tax standpoint
Yeah,
is a business reports it and they may be located in
Yep.
this section, but their activity may be from a different section in the county. And so I don't think from a sales tax standpoint, we can slice that down for you that way.
but yeah, well, maybe trapping it by a permit.
We could definitely do a heat map
Yeah.
based on building values.
The only reason I'm curious about it is, would that information help inform us with regard to land use decisions or other infrastructure decisions, and where we need to be focusing attentions at to accommodate the growth is kind of where I'm trying to get to.
See if we can.
That's a good question. Next slide. So for the automobile sectors, again, new car dealers, pretty flat. The other sectors are actually, again, starting to show a slight increase. It doesn't really show it on paper, but just looking at the trend, it is up, just on, not up enough to change the percentages. So used vehicles down 12% year over year. The other motor vehicle sectors still showing slight improvement. Still not sure why, because that usually means a lot of discretionary income, but we're spending on that. Next slide. The restaurants and drinking sector is also starting to show a little bit more improvement, slow improvement, but they're jumping up. Nothing, no, yes, sir.
So, but the interesting thing about that metric is that while the dollar amount might be up, the amount of restaurant activity is down. And it's the price of the meal that's gone up that's driving the sales, not the frequency of the visit.
Yes.
So I've heard that a lot from restaurateurs that are saying, yeah, we're dollar amounts are up, but our traffic is down. So it's affecting their employment.
Yes, we heard the same thing. So the margins are definitely tighter, right? So their costs have gone up, so they can only do so much to generate that revenue.
A lot of our sales tax categories where dollars up, volumes down.
Volumes down.
Things are more expensive.
Which explains why more people are drinking.
All right, next slide. And then just to summarize, so there's a little bit less on this report. A lot of the data points that we would usually use to build the report aren't coming out until this upcoming week. So the Q3 report on consumer spending and consumer credit will come out next week. So that'll be on the next sales tax report. And things like the Fed. So you'll see like the upside risks. So there's likely a Fed cut like 25 basis points coming in the next couple of days. That's at least what we're anticipating. So right now the rate's about 4.8%. So if they drop it, it'll go down to about 4.6%. So with that, credit card interest rates should lower just a little bit and then open up some capacity to spend. The mortgage rates that we were hoping, as the interest rate dropped, didn't drop so much. It was baked in apparently. So the mortgage rates actually gone up. So we're not seeing that benefit. But that's where we're at.
Let's just The next one we wanted to go over was just the 10-month financials for the general fund. Looking at expenses and or revenue. We've got a few departments that we need to look at and really want to hear from the commissioners. Potentially what you want, if you want to have some of those departments come in, talk about shortfalls, what they can do, or how you want to move forward. From the revenue side, I will go over that first. As we talked about sales tax, we received about the same percent of our budget as last year, but with the decline we're seeing based on the 8 months, I don't expect us to get as close to the budget as we did last year. I actually expect to end up about where we ended last year. Property tax, again, that looks like it's way off budget, but that's because the second half of property taxes were due at the end of October, excuse me, and so those don't hit our books until November. The other expenses we're looking, other revenues. Don't see any major concerns there, but I do believe we will end up a little bit short of our budgeted revenue, primarily because of sales and use tax. Go to the next page.
Quick question.
Yes.
Can you just remind me what the other revenues covers?
Other revenues can be things such as, well, that's not either government transfers. Yes, so no interest income. What else?
It is transfers in. Intergovernmental is from other governmental entities, not from ourselves as the government to ourselves. So other revenues includes inter-fund transfers, so the mental health sales tax transfers in. It has in there some of the ARP where we paid ourselves for revenue replacement, things like that. So that one will fluctuate the most on a year-to-year basis, depending on
Like the Valley contract or the contract with the
That'll be under charge for services.
charge for.
But for example, anything.
so the state is the intergovernmental
So state funds, okay.
Like the real-time crime center where we transfer money from the ARP fund into the general fund, things like that. You're welcome. Next page then. So these are all the agencies that you see in the general fund. Just as a reminder, we are 10 months through, which is about 83 1/3%. So this is where we're going to start looking at some of these, letting you know if we're going to need to do some year-end budget adjustments and or what process do you want us to take for that? For example, for public defense, they're showing at 82% right now, but we received an email from them just the other day, late last week, that they feel they will not have enough budget to meet their expenses because they filled all their positions recently with a lot of running ones. And then now they're also requesting to reclassify some of those from 1 to 3. So they do not have enough budget authority to do that.
PDs.
Public defenders, PDs, yes. So again, what process does the board want to go through for looking at additional budget? Are you going to want a presentation from them? I mean, I know we are going to have to try to help them figure out what that total amount is, but what does the board want to have as a presentation? So when we look at those, that you have information to make decisions on. I can tell you things like juvenile, that is primarily that they filled their positions better than the vacancy adjustment we had taken from them last year. I can tell you that the hearing examiner, it's because when we hired the new one, they were at a different grade than the previous one was at, and we did not adjust the budget. So that I would say is something that our department missed when we did last year's budget. But those two I can explain easily, but as far as the others, are you wanting a presentation from them? Do you want us just to give you a number?
I think just a number and an explanation that
Okay.
that you vetted.
Okay.
To show, like, with the public defenders, I mean, we know they were.
Trying to fill
Yes.
positions.
So it's
And
very
part of
understaffed.
that's because, you know, they went to 40 hours, and
Hiring success.
Yeah, I think they're doing good.
we raised the
But
minimum wage.
That
on
means
the
there's
ones-
no more, yeah, they,
Right, so,
they maxed out this year's budget, yeah.
correct. So it's all those things combined together. So I just wanted to know the process that you wanted.
Because those would have to be budget adjustments. that
Those
we
will have to be-
redo For 2024.
That is correct. So we will need to get started on that because we need to do the notices to,
Takes, but those don't have to be done until the end of the year.
yes. So that would probably be
Not
on
December
your
4th.
last
Correct.
meeting in December that we would get that authority. That's correct.
If there are other, I'm just wondering where is that, what's the source of funds to cover that? And does it, if certain departments are underspending, is that the source of, like, just curious?
And that's, we
how
would,
that-
we would
where
say
it
it
comes
is,
from.
it would be, we would say fund balance. And then if other departments underspend, that will build fund balance back again.
Okay,
The other option, if you want to do it, is you could say, we are de-obligating some spending authority from one agency and transferring it to another. You could do that as well, or you could just say fund balance. I would recommend just saying fund balance.
I would just be curious to know. Is there a pot or a set of funds in fund balance that is there by virtue of other departments underspend?
Yeah, it's just part of your unreserved fund balance at the end of the year.
Right.
It just all goes into that same pot. This is gonna be one of our first years where our budget, we're anticipating more expenses than our revenues are coming in, I think at this point. So it's gonna be, some that washes out in fund. Or
Maybe
not.
not. That all depends on decisions that the board makes later, because right now, our revenue, with my revised, taking some revenues down, we still have about 11 point some million compared to what the target budgets were for people. So,
I'm talking about 2024.
oh,
Right, for a
Right.
function of the math, yep.
Based on the sales tax
yes,
numbers that you
Yes.
just gave us.
I'm
we're
sorry.
gonna Be short.
I'm sorry, I thought you were talking about 25. My
Yeah,
apologies.
We're gonna be short, which will affect fund balance. I mean, that's the only place it does. And so if our sales tax revenue, when we do a balanced budget, approve the balanced budget for 24, if our revenues did not meet the target, then our expenses are going higher than our revenues.
If we expand everything.
Yes.
Well, the reason I asked is because the total here is showing 75%
Correct.
spent, but this is 83% through the year.
That is
So
correct.
we're actually underspent on.
From
expense
a
side,
grand
right?
total, yes.
On a pace, way of
Yes.
looking at it.
And then there are some bills that we pay, like our dispatch bill to Shrek, timely that they presented today. We pay 2 installments out of the general fund. We pay one early in the year and we pay one right about when we get sales tax, so or property tax, so we have a high cash point again to make a $1.5 million payment out of the general fund. So that's showing it 50% right now on this report. That payment's in process, so it's not an actual yet, but
This is not on an accrual basis.
This is
Yes.
not, this is truly on a cash basis.
And then, yes, some departments are underspent. You can see, auditor elections currently is at 70%.
But we
They
are
will
in-
quickly spend the rest of their budget
They
this
might
month.
be a little busy, yeah.
Gotcha.
Just some-
December or November will be a high expense month.
Yes.
That's correct.
Commissioner French.
So I'm remembering back to a couple previous cycles where we had limited revenue and expenses that were exceeding. And maybe Tess, you might remember, Randy. One of the things we did was we asked the departments, if we can't increase your budget for 2025, what is it that you will not be able to do? And is what you're not going to be able to do statutorily required? Or is it something that's an internal policy that, you know, maybe this is an opportunity for us to adjust our policies to reflect the fact that we can't do this because we don't have enough money. So is, you know, you ask, what do we want from the departments? I want to know what the drop dead is and what the casualties are in terms of what we are not going to be able to fund.
Must do's and the nice to do's.
Yeah, the must do's and the nice to do's and stupid stuff we still do for no apparent reason.
While not directly asking them that, we kind of did in the budget exercise. We said we have an austere budget. We have declining revenues or revenues that aren't growing as much as we have to. So what is it that you are needing to ask in this budget? And are you looking yourself to try to cut some things out of the budget? So we've asked that. Most of them asked for beyond the target budget. So
What always happens.
yeah,
So
What can you cut when they say?
But also,
"Give me
I
an
think we've made
extra"?
some-
what I want to do is I want to change the question. We're not going to fund your request. What is it that you cannot do? And that's a little bit more direct in terms of forcing them to say, okay, I'm not going to do this, this, and this. And then we can decide whether there's any value to that or not. But it's might be getting to the same thing, but I want them to be able to say, we're not going to be able to do X anymore. Great. Is there any value? Is there any value lost by not doing X? I don't know. But that's the casualty of not being able to have enough money.
certainly a different way to pose the question.
I would say that is where we are going for 26 budget. Because we switched horses in the middle of the stream, so to speak, this year. I think it was a little rough and rocky. But I do see that is where 26 is going. Where the commissioners, we will do a forecast. We will then have the commissioners say, this is how much money we are gonna set aside to be budgeted. And give target budgets to each agency and ask that very question.
Well, it's not, my goal is not only to inform our budget process, but it's also to inform the legislature as they look at indigent defense and some of the other things that we really would like them to start funding. We can't do this because you're not doing that. And it helps inform that conversation.
That's correct.
And I think consistently throughout this budget process, we've heard Commissioner Cuny discuss, utilizing larger purchasing contracts and agreements across county departments to be smarter with our dollar. And I think purchasing has definitely heard that and wants to work towards that. We've also built our new ERP system with a lot of this in mind. Some easier ways to access consistent pricing on things through punch out systems and stuff like that. So we should see some better buying power out of departments coming in the future. That's the goal. So,
We live in hope.
yes.
So what we'll do is for those expenses that look to be trending beyond budget that are pretty intuitive, we can see it pretty clearly like a hearing examiner. We can do that work. If it's something that really we need the department to justify the ask to go beyond, I think that's what we'll want to bring them in for. So we'll continue to monitor this, and as we get into end of November, we have a pretty good idea of where December might fit. We'll bring that package together as one of the last meetings.
So appreciate where you're coming from, but you used a term, and I'm not sure that I'm there with you with regard to the term you used. And you said, I want them to justify their request. I don't want them to justify the request. I want them to say, what is it that we're not going to fund? Because that's a different kind of question, and it forces them to approach their budget from a different perspective. I only got this much. What am I not going to be able to do? That's what I want to know is what am I going to lose in this budget?
Yep, I'm tracking you. I was referring to 2024 numbers, but you could still apply the same thing. Don't come in requesting what your additional budget authority for this year. Tell us what you're doing to slow the spend.
Yes.
Between now and the end of the year.
Now you got it.
Yep.
I only have one budget thing I would like to try to get done yet today. I know we're running a little behind.
Before we go there, could we just, as the follow-up to the two entities who are presenting for Spokane Sports and Historical Pres, you won't take action, final action until the budget approves, but would like to get some ideas from the board if you're comfortable putting the amounts requested into the.
I thought I would update the spreadsheets, get them out to them today. And then maybe next Tuesday, when in our budget session, we can set those so that we could get those contracts in place before year end. And that works.
And we can show you the historical preservation, here's what the fund looks like, here's what it's
Right. I want-
generating. And then the car rental tax, because you've already, the board has already said, yes, let's put.
Yeah.
We are agreeing with putting $1 million towards Plants Ferry. So then what does that leave left?
Yes, so just wanted to update those sheets for that before we made that decision.
So can I ask Randy, are you asking us to each maybe have our spreadsheets filled out when we show up next Tuesday? Be used as a guide?
I think we are, next Tuesday and the following Friday, we will need to be having those conversations and going through that.
Okay.
I would like to do capital today if we could to get a start, because Doug presented some stuff last week that we need to get some decisions on regarding his, I always get the three initials wrong.
Yeah.
TGM or
GMP.
GMP
Is that
or.
Guaranteed maximum price.
Yeah.
That's the right letters.
To the validation for Canvas. and-
Yes,
and-
so this is the canvas and so basically we wanted to go through at least a couple of areas and I did give you a printout. There is an electronic copy in the shared folder. There's also an electronic copy of the updated REIT 1 and REIT 2 spreadsheets. Those amounts of available budget are at the top of this sheet on the first page. 7 million of REIT 1 and the 4.8 million of REIT 2. We have, as suggestions or options, we have filled in some numbers here. Again, these are not decisions you have made, but these are some thoughts from our standpoint. If we go back to the second page, actually it's the bottom of the first page, Fair and Expo, and then into the second page. Fair and Expo and Parks are the ones that of course use a lot of REIT 1 and REIT 2. In last year's budget, we had committed to the showers restroom project. That isn't completed yet. That one, they had some 250,000 of grants. They had put in 300,000 of REIT and 150,000 special revenue. The special revenue for the fair and expo is the PFD credit enhancement of 1.273 million. So that can only be spent by Fair and Expo. And so you'll see when you go to the second page, we've allocated out that 1.273 million. There are certain things that are not funded out. We only looked at right now 2025, and with their 2025 requests, we had enough money in the special revenue. If we used 163,000 of their fund balance and 307,000 of REIT 1. The only new additional REIT 1 is for the campground improvements of 7,000 plus last year's carryover of 300,000. And then the 488 grants. But that does use all of that special revenue, and that is using some REIT 1 money.
Question.
Yes.
Well, can you clarify what that credit enhancement is?
So in 2021, I think it's 2021, we issued Spokane County LTGO debt, and then, no, excuse me, the PFD issued debt, and we let them use our credit rating. And that saved them money. And so they had to pay the county back for 25% of that savings, or $2 million, whichever was smaller. The 25% of savings was $1.273 million. They paid us 300 and some thousand last May 31st, and will pay us the remaining amount this next May 31st.
So it can only be used on.
And it can only be used for projects that are like the PFD, which really, it has to be out at the fairgrounds. Has to be something that had over $10 million of
A lot of unique restrictions on what the PFD sales tax is.
So if we are fine on the parks, or excuse me, the fair and expo, I'd like to then jump to parks. And go over primarily just because we need some decisions for Doug. Again, REAP 2, as Doug mentioned last week, we had committed it's bottom of page 2 there. Right where you're seeing that, basically. Right there. Shields Park, that is where we committed $500,000 of REAP 2 to it earlier this year. We had a commitment last year for the Airway Heights ORV renovation phase 1 that has not been completed yet. They did get a grant from the RCO of $336,000. They won't complete this until 2025, but we committed $200,000 of REAP 2 to that as well. Doug's request for Camas Meadows, again, that is a $7 million project. $6.5 million will be spent in 25. They have $5.5 million remaining of ARP. That's what the special revenue is there. And Doug's request was for $1 million of REAP 2. The one after that was Plants Ferry. Again, that is a $9.5 million project. They have spent some money, so they have about $8.85 million left to spend. They have $5.35 million special revenue. 500,000 of that is No. 4.35 of that is ARP revenue, and $1 million of that is the car rental tax that is eligible to be used out there. Doug did request 1.7 million of REAP 2 for that project. Again, that gets us fields 1 and 2 completely lit, the parking lot connected and done, and the road toward Trent out to the county line. Does not get us to Trent because that is technically Liberty Lake, or excuse me, Spokane Valley property. And it does not get us field 3. So that is the 1.8 million that is in undesignated. That is a shortfall to complete that project. That is where you guys have other asks. I know Scott has talked to Spokane Valley, and I know you have legislative asks, things like that. But that is, yes, I'm sorry.
So I just need to clarify again, just since I wasn't here. So on Plants Ferry,
Yes.
so the special revenue of 5.3 is.
That is 4.35 of ARP
$1 million.
and $1 million of car rental tax.
So that's, we have those funds.
We do. We estimate about $1.5 million. Yes,
Then we have the 5.5 for Camas.
that is correct.
Already set.
That is an ARP. Yes, we have that.
Okay, so we have those. So then the 1.7 of REAP 2 is to do the additional.
That is an ask from Doug to do the additionals. That includes everything except field 3 and the road out to Trent from the county line to Trent.
Okay, so that's. Okay.
And I did, I had met with John Holman last week, just asking for an update. They're doing their LTAC. We're actually presenting right now to the LTAC committee out there. I believe he said they have about 2.5 million of available funds to allocate. It appears like his read is the LTAC committee is probably going to commit cross course. So there's a likelihood of us, the county getting dollars from LTAC for Plants Ferry is probably been. So at least from his reading of the teams.
But we, I think I shared last week that, Representative Riccelli has indicated a willingness to champion and ask for Plants Ferry. He's got a special spot in his heart for Plants Ferry, so I'm assuming we're gonna add that to our capital request for this next year.
For the legislature, yeah.
So that could help provide some additional relief if we can get that funding from anything we can get from the state would help.
And I think we have a $2 million request. I mean, Jeff would know into the governor's budget
Okay.
or is one the Valley was doing. The Valley doing it?
I think they decided not to, from what I heard.
Okay. So just a $1 million ask into the governor's budget, which
Right.
then would relate onto our capital request as well. So I think that's already there.
So I'm comfortable moving forward with the floor request out of the REIT-2 funds. And if we're successful, we can always supplant. But if we're not successful, we know that we've got it funded. So, I mean, those 4 projects I think are due for investment. And so I wouldn't have any problem supporting all.
Commissioner French, we don't have that much REIT two available. If
No,
you move,
He's good with these.
no, if he moves, he's talking about the 1.8 million,
Yeah.
correct?
No.
Oh, okay,
No.
all right, okay, I
The 4 as
apologize.
proposed.
I'm sorry. Commissioner French, I thought you were asking to move an additional 1.8 over there.
No, no,
I
no,
say I
no.
don't have that much
I'm
time.
following your chart.
Okay,
No, no, no.
okay. I apologize.
No, that's all right.
And I think what I shared last week is up to 1.7 in REIT 2.
Correct.
Yeah.
If we are successful getting some other funds elsewhere, then we don't have to use the entire REIT.
Right.
Yes, the 1.7.
And I'm sorry, I missed the presentation, but is the 9.5 what I know they've been doing a bunch of design work. Is that what they came up with?
That was
Or
the validation
how many of the?
That would be for 3 lighted artificial turf fields, the parking lot, and then the road connection out to Trent. Okay. To fully fund it. And we had to do some in there as well as some sewer $650,000, yeah.
That's the 1.8.
1.8 would be for the additional lit field and the road connection to Trent. Okay, so those right now don't have identified funds for them.
Okay.
But that's not included in the 9.5. Okay.
It is, but it's unidentified, undesignated means there's no funding. source for it.
Yeah, we don't have a fund on source.
Unfunded. Maybe we should call it unfunded.
I will change the heading to unfunded.
So I guess I'm trying to.
I get it. I was just trying to make sure everything was included in the number or not.
Yes.
So where do I find the REIT funds?
Okay, if you go to under capital.
No, but I get it where we're at, so. I mean, even if we got $1 million from the state, we're still under.
Right, so if
But
you-
maybe we would choose to just take that out.
So if I put those in there.
There could be, and if it's settling on a road, there could be other avenues of funding sources that may seem more palatable at the time. We don't
Oh, that's
know.
right, because if it's a road project into
It
the
may
facility.
be a different source of funds, yes.
It's property that's in this city of Spokane Valley. We don't even know it. It's RCO property. State Parks and Rec.
Oh.
Not RCO, State Parks and Rec.
Okay, so if we fund all of those, we still have 1.2 million left. in the program.
Yeah, we will have 1.3 million left in REIT two, that is correct.
We have
In
one-
addition, The 1.2 Commissioner on that sheet, that's just what we want to leave in there. Because that is 2 years of debt, of future commitments.
Yep.
That will leave us 1.3 of fund balance in excess of that we have not used. But we will be using a little more than half of our fund balance that we have in there today.
So if you look at this capital guide, go to the very last page. The first page top shows the capacity in REIT 1 and REIT 2. The bottom of it shows of the capacity, what hasn't been proposed to commit yet. So it still leaves $1.4 million. In addition to what our targeted fund balance was. Ending balance.
I mean, I guess I'm with Commissioner French that I'm okay committing those dollars. Same here.
Yes.
Perfect. So we'll pass that on to Doug and to Aaron that we're done with those. I know we have Scott here, so I don't know if you want to go through more capital or Scott.
I just wanted to make a comment. Doug's on or not, he's out this week, but there's a number of projects that we have going on in parks, a number of ongoing stuff that's carryover. My recommendation is we don't invest in more planning and more project work for next year. That team he's got 3 new people that's on board. They're doing great work. You know, we need to commit to not overburdening them. Knights Ferry and Camas Meadow, finishing up Liberty Lake, Bear Lake. There's some Fish Lake. I mean, there's a lot of projects going on, and I know he's swimming.
He's on.
Oh, there he is.
Hey, Doug.
Knew we were done. Yeah.
Your name mentioned.
Its ears reverted.
So did you hear what Scott was just saying?
Yes, I think I heard a lot of great news for our Plants Ferry and Camas Meadow projects. It'll be very, very helpful.
And I also mentioned, Doug, I think that we ought to stop committing additional dollars to new parks related projects to allow your team really to focus and deliver these major large projects that you have going on right now. So that as far as looking at REIT 2, my recommendation is we do not go and invest in the next, the fish lake, the Liberty Lake, all those sort of things. Give your team a chance to get the projects done right now, unless there's something critical, like within the aquatic side, that you think have to be done next year. I think we take a little bit of it's not even really a pause. It's just let them get this work done.
Okay. I'll talk to ops. I know the aquatic stuff is related to repairs of the pool surfacing. We might be able to go another year on that, and we'll obviously work with whatever we have. But I understand. I think some of the small dollar funds for Liberty Lake and Fish Lake were looking ahead, more planning related to set up for future capital investments a couple of years down the road. But we will happily work with whatever we have. And as you mentioned, we definitely have our hands full now, and we're very excited to maximize the benefit of these projects while we have the expertise on board.
I think primarily today, we wanted to get some direction on REIT 1 and REIT 2, so that at least we can get the parks projects firmed up and moving forward.
And so with that, I'll leave it up to you, commissioners. We can continue on. I know we have Mr. Chesney.
We're gonna need to continue on.
All right.
Or
We will move this.
to next week.
We will, go to our next session.
Just circling back to the question about for 2024, the departments that are gonna hit their, I think, just like you were suggesting, Madam Chair, is having just like a brief description of why they're gonna hit their budget early. And okay, they hired everyone that they were supposed to hire, and the increase in the 40-hour a week, for just a little description would be helpful to know if that was something that was planned for or maybe was unplanned for, right?
we'll bring that back.
Well, and
They can bring that back.
this, I was saying that, you know, you don't need to make those decisions till the end of the year, but
That's
they will feed into the decisions into 2025 because there won't be a vacancy adjustment that we'll be doing. So,
Unless they do it themselves. The departments.
yes, which would mean they had employees. I
They
mean,
just funded vacant positions.
right, but if like the public defenders say they've filled their vacant positions, there's no vacancy adjustment to be had. So it's, you know, just making sure we're aware of those. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
But you would like us to, Randy, I'm gonna just make sure we know our work, to look at this and see what we think we can fund or not fund.
Right, and we've made some suggestions. We also put an updated sheet out there for you, Commissioner Carnes, with the new revenue numbers that I've updated. We actually did move a couple of requests that really weren't capital. We moved them to the decision sheet also. For example, the clerk's office, the treasurer's office. That was really software maintenance. I want to move that to operations. So we'll add that to that operation sheet.
Yeah, so two things, the capital, this thing, and then the decision guide on maintenance and expense obligations, because they tie together, right? Whatever you choose to fund out of that 11.6 for capital, that only leaves X dollars for M&A.
Because there is one column on here called general fund. So anything that's put into the general fund column, we would translate over and carry over to that decision guide as a reduction there.
I guess since Doug's still on, just if there's, and maybe he did this last week, but I know the focus is mostly on canvas and plans. If there are certain of these different capital requests that are higher priority, it would be good to know of the ones that we don't have, you know, designated funds for yet. So
More than anything, I just wanted to get the general support for
no, I.
glowing, but we'll
We have a lot of
definitely-
projects that are being done, and so we want to make sure we get them done well. But we don't want to lose sight of in the future, setting ourselves up for, you know, state funding and other funding by not making some strategic investments. So, yeah.
And I guess I'm just gonna double check. I thought these were in order of their highest priorities.
Essentially, yes.
Okay.
I
And
wouldn't-
then some of it's based on timing too. I mean, so
Yes.
it's not 2025.
That would be, yeah, the obvious. You really only look at,
So
the
only
only
look
thing you
at
need to look at is 2025 on this sheet.
okay.
We have to have a 6-year, of course, for our statutory requirements, but, and our planning requirements, but this is, just look at 25.
Got it.
Commissioners, for each year, they did rank their ones in that year, one to whatever.
In this spreadsheet.
Yes, so the 25s were ranked according to how Doug ranked them.
It's nice square
26,
feet.
yeah.
Okay,
26s were
that's helpful.
ranked.
That's what I'm thinking. Okay. Thank you. Okay. Scott, welcome. Sorry we're a little late.
No
so-
worries.
yeah.
Not at all. A couple of quick things before we start, just based on your previous agenda. Our team is working with Randy specifically to make sure that these capital improvement projects, the REIT funded ones and those that are related to development are in fact tied into the capital facilities plan for the comp plan, so that we keep in compliance all the work that you and others did in these last couple of years. So we're making sure that takes place, so that we don't drift aside from where we were before. And we will also be working with Doug on his planning efforts as part of the comprehensive plan, parks and open space plan too. So we'll be helping him. We'll dovetail, that plan will have broad goals that fit in the comprehensive plan, and then there's an overlap, and then there's a set of detailed ones. We can help him get all the way through the overlap, and then the detailed parts are more O&M style things. So a couple collaborative efforts that we're working on.
Thank you. Appreciate
with our
that.
team. Today, we're back before you. Given the time, we'll go through the slides pretty quickly. You've seen an earlier version of this. We had a few updates for our audience, but also we want to get to kind of nuts and bolts of some of the things we're finding and some of the things we're hearing from comments from agencies, individuals, and landowners. You can see here, these are the 5 planning principles that we've we've used to guide the initial part of the process. Next, please. And this reflects the 3-part permitting system that is in play for renewable energy. There is the upcoming, presuming that we adopt our own code, there will be a local code. Typically, energy companies like to start with a local code because they have to deal with the more local element. If that is not in place, or if they choose, they can go to the FSEC, the Energy Facility Site Evaluation Council. And as you probably saw in the paper recently, their recommendation on the Horse Heaven Hills project was rejected by the governor, and they finally signed a new agreement to go back to nearly full strength on that. So it's a clear mandate from at least this governor on renewable energy being more important than local conditions in many cases. That was based mostly on habitat protection. We're looking at some other elements for Spokane County. Third element is Department of Fish and Wildlife, I'm sorry, Ecology, and they're looking at a way of using the environmental impact statements to better understand where energy facilities should and should not go. Next, please. We'll skip pretty much through this quickly, but this is a summary. It's in the packet for those 3, a quick comparison of the 3 major types of permitting. Next, please. So these are the main elements we look at in creating code. What are the public safety, the turbines, technical elements, and then mostly you can see the setback. There's a number of those that relate to how they can be adjacent or proximate to other uses. Next, please. This shows the evolution of these wind turbines over time, how they've gotten considerably larger for onshore and quite large for the offshore systems. Next, please. That relates to their ability to generate energy. The larger rotors can generate more energy. Pretty simply put. Next, please. So findings for height. We're seeing that there really is no best practice for a height standard. That is an engineering function, and the other issues related to this can be handled through the geography and the particular issues. Next, please. Setback requirements are where the key comes together from occupied buildings, the shadow flicker, the visuals, boundaries of communities, and setbacks from non-participating adjacent landowners, which we have no official idea who has signed up, but we'll talk a little bit about that as we go. Next, please. So into the details for this, we're seeing a couple of things changing. The 1,000-foot setback has become sort of a standard. And then there's the 1.5 times the height of the tower plus the tallest blade as a secondary standard. And that is becoming more of the industry practice. FSEC, on the other, has created a 2,500-foot setback for projects in their world. Next, please. And this is where you can see where we've gotten that information, the citations for those examples. Next, please.
Just a question on that.
Yes, sir.
Is that you say FSEC has created some 2,500-foot setback? It's not or is that a standard, or is it more of a case-by-case situation for them?
I would say it's a case by case. They made that as a finding, and they are not an adjudicative body of any kind. So they simply added that as a statement of a finding. Okay. How that translates into future code, we don't know yet.
Okay.
Next, please. Setbacks from property lines. The 1 to 1.25 standard is there. And then another issue that came up from FSEC is a potential 4 times standard that could really extend the setback size, but as you might imagine, that will reduce the available land. And we'll show you some of that in just a couple of slides here. Next, please. So there are 2 sources that are currently out, or at least these 2 we found. One is a journal article from, I believe it's British Columbia, a 3,000 to 4,000 foot standard. is something that's being seen from a best practices perspective. And then the court case is where FSEC now generated this 4 times height turbine setback. So there's a lot of variance in what's becoming out there as maybe not a best practice, but as a common discussion for where people want to go. Next, please. Fish and Wildlife is weighing in on this, where they're looking at habitat protection. This is particularly important for Spokane County as it relates to a southwestern part of our geography, not just Turnbull, but those the scab lands that go all the way out to the county line. Next, please. The visual resources, what do these look like? How obtrusive are they? Should they be painted different colors? So there are some cruising standards there. Next, please. And then noise. Those of you that have been in the vicinity of these know that they do make noise. They have audible impacts, and that has impacts, as you might imagine, much like living next to an airport. It is going to be affecting your quality of life if you're within an area. Next, please. Something most of us didn't really think about, but what's called shadow flicker. And you might imagine that if you were in a room, put it this way, if you were of a certain age and in a room with an old pedestal fan spinning in the summer and there was a light bulb behind it, you get that sort of strobe effect. That's what this is talking about. So if the turbine is between the sun and a home, you're going to get that flicker effect on your house, and that's that has some impact on it. Next, please. Aviation safety, again, a very obvious thing. So, here's somewhere that 4 times height commitment can come into play using, say, the ACC 5 boundary, which is the more expansive version of an airport. That would provide quite a lot of distance. Now, in the case of Fairchild, I don't know if that would fit their inbound flight patterns yet. We haven't really mapped the entire thing in certainty. But because they only have half of their pattern available to them because of Spokane International on their southern side, all of their aircraft have to come into the Northeast and make that bank in, and it's just far enough out to provide protection so that the Air Force mission is not jeopardized. Now, some of the new stuff that you haven't done.
Just another question on the aviation side too, because one of the things I've heard from South County residents is that crop dusting.
Yes.
How does that affect crop dusting?
Absolutely, it will. And there's one slide coming up, but we haven't yet found a definitive source to tell us that there's been a standard. The energy companies in the comment at the last public hearing said, we can work with property owners to say if they're going to do crop dusting or aerial seeding or something like that, we'll stop the turbines for an afternoon and let them fly through. That's the only thing we've heard about whether there's any compatibility. So it's a significant issue. Next, please. Oh, sorry.
So Whitman, I was noticing when I was coming back from Walla Walla, that Whitman County's got quite a few wind turbines just south of Spokane County. Have you had a chance to look at their code and what they did and did not do with regard to that? And
we have some of that is reflected in here. Some of that is reflected in the comments we received.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Next, please. This is a wind map for Washington State. Generally, you can see the greener colors are actually lower winds, but as they get into the yellows and oranges, those are a little bit higher wind speeds in meters per second. Spokane County in the Palouse area is in that yellow category, which is the generally higher for our county. But you can see why Whitman, Benton, Kittitas, and others, where they've got in the browns and oranges, have been the first choices for selections. So Spokane County is clearly in that secondary, tertiary range of, okay, we've got the good sites, where are we going to go next? Next, please. what all this comes down to is a series of constraint maps, and I realize this is, this is most of the county, but it's very hard to see on a big screen like this. However, you can see this is what the buffers around the towns. Those blue strips are protecting private airports, private airstrips, which you may or may not have realized how many there are in our Palouse area, but that gets right back to the crop dusting idea. Critical areas, in particularly the southwest corner of the county, the green outline is a buffer around Turnbull and then other lakes and streams. If we go to the next map, we add the buffers around occupied buildings. Again, not as much in the Palouse area, not surprisingly, mostly on the north side, on the northwest corner. And then the last, and then before we go to the next slide, what this might suggest is if we're staying away from critical areas, then those areas around Turnbull to Turnbull's northeast and southwest are not good areas to promote wind energy. Those are areas that are going to be hard to site because there's a lot of critical areas, and they're very much, because those critical areas are there, they're very much in the flyways and the habitat migration patterns. The wind map, as you recall, had the stronger winds in our southeast county where the loose lands are, and Whitman County, as Commissioner French noted, to the south. But if you go to now the next slide, this is one of those, oh yeah, we forgot about slides. All of the green, the light and dark green, are USDA prime ag soils. The red soils are not prime ag. The dark, or the two greens are both USDA prime and what are called farmland of statewide importance. Those are the ones that are protected by GMA significantly. So this map and the one before that, one before it shows the best place to site this away from those constraints is in the southeast corner of the county. You drop the farm and ag map on top of it, it says, well, that's the worst place to put it because we have to protect our farm and ag businesses. So this is the dilemma that we're going to keep sorting through to provide guidance with your direction to move these forward.
So as you look at map 21, as I talked to the folks on Fairchild, they've indicated that their concern extends well beyond, further to the north than we've shown on this map. Okay, you're aware of that.
Very much.
Okay, never mind.
Yeah,
their training cycles have been influenced by the hotels and everything else.
The inbound flight maps we worked through when we did the JLUs.
Yep.
And so we're very much aware of that pattern being on the north side of their runway. We didn't draw it in here just because this was busy enough.
Yeah, okay, thanks. As long as you're aware of it, that's all I care about.
So Scott, before you,
Yes.
oh, last. So dark green is the farmland that has to be protected. The red then is.
Red is not prime farmland.
Okay.
In the map vernacular. So that's areas that would not necessarily be protected by the GMA resource lands protection. But it's also the area that is most affected by critical areas and other natural resources protections.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, please. One of the things we wanted to remind everyone of is that when we go down this path, there really needs to be a decommissioning plan. Some of the comments we did hear was, what happens when these get old? What happens when they get taken down? And absent a more direct plan, we are at no ability to guide that changing. Next, please. And there's just the last couple of these. This gets now into the revenue side that Commissioner Judy, you brought up before. These are slides that come from WASAC and some of the research with their work on property tax impacts. What you can see is this dilemma. It provides a fairly significant boost when these are constructed. But because these are considered personal property and not real property, they are able to be depreciated by the owners. Next slide, please. And what that looks like is, here's a slide of a project that went from $1 million or so in their first year of construction to about half that 10 years later. So one of the things that talking with Joe and our assessors and a couple other assessors around the county is around the state. They're very aware of this, and they're concerned about the gap or the delta that the boosted that revenue from the beginning sets a benchmark for a county that is in place, but those are depreciated. The benchmark doesn't necessarily change, meaning somebody's got to fill in the delta. And that means if these depreciate, other property taxpayers are going to see an increase in cost to fill the county budget. We don't have the details on that specifically, but we're aware of this dilemma, and we're working with our assessors to try to figure out what that really means.
Well, and they've been on the calls that this committee through WASAC has had, and we're meeting the afternoon of the 18th, Vancouver to the committee is to discuss what our options are and what, and there's been a legislator that's been active on those conversations too. So that way we can figure out what other, we've looked at what other states have done, what other ways to make this more equitable. So that's part of what I think we won't have any recommendation until after the 18th, from at least from WASAC.
And we look forward to anything you can tell us after that, and we'll keep digging ourselves too. One more slide, please, Rod. We did find some possible revenue sources from other areas. One, called a nameplate tax or something that says, $1 per megawatt or something on that is different than a property tax, a production tax, or an income generation tax of some kind. So there have been revenue sources attached to other projects, but we're not anywhere near a recommendation for Spokane County yet. In a nutshell, that's what we've got in terms of an update. We are welcome to take your questions, and if you'd like, I can go through some of the comments that we've had. I guess I would tell you quickly, in summarizing the comments, the overwhelming share of them, probably 85% of the individual comments that came in were not supportive of this, or were at least very concerned about the impacts. And it went from some of the obvious visual impacts, too close to highways, to disposal impacts, what happens when they fall down. The ones that were most positive were those from landowners that already have signed agreements, and they were clear about this in their own testimony, saying, as we had as one of our bullet points, this does provide an income stream for them that helps offset bad crop yields or bad years in agriculture. So they're saying, don't take this away from us. This is something that might help us keep our farm viable for another generation. From Turnbull, they would like to have not only their boundary protected, but what they call their sustainable or their supporting area, which is a bigger boundary outside of that, as much as 3 or 4 miles. The energy companies were not in favor of that. The biggest part of that, though, is also in those scab lands. So if the scab lands and the critical areas are protected, some of that goes away to mitigate Turnbull's issue. So the agency comments were fairly typical. DFW sent us a list of what they're considering for habitat protection, species protection, and U.S. Department of the Interior also weighed in, representing Turnbull, saying Turnbull's important to the national as well as the Northwest area alliance, and you should do everything you can to protect it. So that's kind of what we've heard over three public hearings and a workshop. Our suggestion going forward is there's still a lot to learn on this. There's some risk that if we don't enact something in the next, say, half a year, maybe we would be at risk of an energy company going straight to FSEC, and we'd then have to, one of you presumably would get a seat at the table to negotiate that. The challenge we're seeing from some of the court decisions and even the FSEC and governor's decision is some of those are being based on SEPA analysis, going through a checklist and finding essentially a determination of non-significance because the ordinance is not going to be a project. What we're believing is this because of the way we're looking at it, there will be impacts, and this should have a determination of significance, which triggers the environmental impact assessment program. That is the most rigorous way of assessing these impacts. It's also the most defensible when we go to committee or even the governor, because we'll have that EIS statement. The downside is that takes time and money to do. It's probably almost a year-long process at best. And it's not an insignificant consulting contract to do that. But that's very likely a recommendation that we will have back for you after the first of the year. Just kind of give you a heads up.
So with regard to the governor's role, we only have to worry about that for another 56 days. And I don't see any of these projects moving forward in that kind of timeline. So things will change after January 1. We don't know whether it's positive or negative, but the idea that you're trying to protect your economic viability of your property assumes that it was generating a revenue prior to the windmill or the wind turbine. And so I'm thinking to maintain your water rights for a well, you have to show that you've had viable use of the well for 5 years. Otherwise, you have the risk of losing your rights. Is there maybe some kind of metric that says, you've got to demonstrate that you've created some kind of economic value of the land other than just scab land to justify the economic viability of the property? Is that something you guys looked at, or?
We haven't looked at it in detail, but yes, in concept, that's very much in play.
Okay.
It works both ways. You need to demonstrate some viability here if you're not in a prime ag area that says, well, we still want this sort of exemption to build this.
Right.
And then on the ag areas, the criteria, at least the proposed one, is you need to demonstrate no serious degradation of the agricultural use.
Yeah.
And that was a number of the concerns from the public, is this will damage the ag use from the beginning by building the roads to construct them, then by taking even 1 acre at a time. But if you take 200 acres out for 200 windmills and then roads in between the connection, that's a lot of cropland that goes away. Yeah. And as we talked about last time with wedding venues in RT, the Supreme Court ruled against King County for taking ag lands out of production for wine tasting rooms and brew pubs at a much smaller scale. So how are they going to react to this if even if it's 2,000 acres, if 200 or 400 of those are coming out, and the state Supreme Court has already ruled 10 acres is too much? How is this going to fit in there? So, where is the path through this that would be supported? Okay.
Thanks for the update information. I just want to let you know I recently did the Avista Community Academy, which some of you may have done before. Very interesting, really enjoyed it. And just through that, they were talking about their current energy portfolio. I think they said that wind is currently 9% of their generation capacity, and it's their preferred renewable of all the different choices, which is interesting. And then I think their current integrated resource plan calls for bringing that up to like 15% of their total over like 20 or something, and they're constantly reevaluating that. So I thought that was interesting, that as the power company looks to the future, they're looking for opportunities to grow their generation capacity. But through that process or that event, they mentioned to me there's some kind of commerce study going on. They call it the Rural Clean Energy Study and Report. I think that my understanding, and I can look into this too, is that the legislature basically asked Commerce to take a look at this issue on a systematic level. There's a consultant, Ross Strategic, involved. I think that's supposed to be pretty close to completion. It's apparently going to the governor's office for review and comment. So that's just something I want to put on your radar. Maybe you're well aware of that
We've
piece
been
too.
talking with Dave about that.
Okay.
And we have a meeting set up with Avista's technical team. It's in December, but we've got one set up for December 18th.
Good. So do you know from talking to Dave what the estimated timeline of that is? It'd just be interesting to look at as we look at a local policy. What is the state looking at in terms of potential changes to the bigger picture?
I have the impression that they want some draft before the end of the year.
It sounded like it was pretty close to being done, so.
Yeah, and one of the things, just so you're aware of too, like the company down in South County, it is a utility company that's not Avista. So.
Right, they
it's-
don't own it, but they paid for it. Is that what you're saying?
No, so it is a separate company that
Oh, okay.
would be putting in the wind turbines that would be sending their energy to other locations. It would not be going to Avista. So part of these are utility
Oh, right.
companies that are coming in to put this out because they all need to find places. They would have to use Avista's transmission lines then to get it to the other location. And it so I know that this project specifically is not an Avista project because they knew nothing about it.
Right.
Because they said they haven't even been contacted to say that they're gonna want to use their transmission lines. And that's part of the issue too, is those transmission lines can only handle so much. As well, so it's just a really complicated whole situation. That, if we're gonna have something, I'd like it to be our local utility company, so the power staying local versus going to other locations.
Right, yeah, I didn't mean to suggest all of those possible groups out there looking at building turbines are for Avista, but I think it's also interesting to think about what is Avista looking at for the future as well.
Yes.
And where might that, demand for those projects be going over time? So, yeah.
One is technology changes too so much, could hydrogen power, nuclear power, just in different new processes that are, just being thought about. Could handle some of that in 20 years.
Yeah,
That has been a real wild card that we've seen just in the last 30 to 60 days. Innovations in nuclear power that may be coming on the horizon. Although realistically, that's probably a 20-year horizon. And these turbines probably have a 20-year life. So there may be a cycle of saying, this works, but there's a sunset. Maybe, and that may be even something you try to put into a development agreement. If another source comes along that provides a better benefit, these need to be sunsetted.
Well, and who's removing them and at what cost?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that at the academy, they talked a lot about that too, about small scale, I forget the exact term, but small scale nuclear, facilities that are a lot smaller than your traditional idea around that.
Hot new topic.
Yeah, but everyone has all these really difficult challenges. They did mention solar paired with local battery storage is another one that's developing. And it's a lot more practical in California, given the state of current battery technology can only hold for a small amount of time. But as battery storage capabilities improve, which they are technologically, that might help as well, be part of their generation capacity in the future, because then you can store what the solar produces and use it later when it's really needed. I think they were talking about doing some kind of demonstration project with the MLK Center on that locally, which would be really interesting.
Did they talk about, when I was working with Urban Nova, like 3 or 4 years ago, I think that they were doing a pilot on the U District campus.
Yes.
A very small battery storage project.
Yes, they talked
But
about
they're
that
looking
too.
at then maybe doing it with an actual facility. What you're
Yes,
saying. Oh,
yeah, and I think there's a grant that supports that too, so. Anyway.
I'm pretty sure you and I have talked, but maybe. So I am working with the company that wants to do a 2,000 acre solar panel farm here in the West Plains. And we're also looking at hydrogen fuel cell manufacturing facility as well. And they are in active conversations with the Vista about tying into the grid and being able to supplement what's happening there. So there's 2 active projects that are underway now, West Plains.
Thank you, commissioners.
Thank you. That's
The
good.
next step of a long discussion.
Lots of layers.
Layers
On the
and layers on the map.
Long conversation with a slow walk.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so we are at noon. Is there any miscellaneous items that we need to discuss? Because we're at noon and I've got a 11:15 or 12:15 law library budget. Oh, I'm so excited.
Could I just ask, so I saw that there was on the 15th, we have a budget workshop.
Yes.
And then on the 18th, when we do our property tax levy hearing, are we holding some extra time there as well? Or are we just making that, are we gonna do more budget work?
Yes.
Just
So-
between 9 and noon?
Yes.
Okay.
Cause then, so what I plan, with WASDAQ, I'm gonna drive over on Sunday so I can zoom in on Monday morning. Because then I've got the afternoon with that group on the.
You have early meetings, yes.
And that should be there Sunday as well.
Yeah. I won't
And I
be
believe
able
the
to.
18th is only if we don't get done on the 15th.
Yes. And it would just be.
We don't get our homework done.
Because on the 18th, the meeting in the morning is really just a quick meeting,
Right.
but.
We could always extend if we have more,
Extend it.
we don't finish up, have still some questions from Friday to resolve.
I anticipate.
No, I think it's good to build in lots of time, so we can do our due diligence.
So you said you're gonna zoom in then on the 18th?
Oh my.
I'll be here.
Okay,
I'll be here.
okay, I'll be here in person too. Okay, I was just gonna see if
Yeah, I
all
was
of us
gonna
were
leave
zooming in or
earlier.
not, or so,
Either
okay.
drive over.
We could have a fun
Yeah.
time.
Monday afternoon or
Okay.
Tuesday morning, but now I have
No, okay, so yeah, so I think that's. it. And then. Tuesday, the 19th, we have a meeting, right?
Yep.
2:00.
We do Tuesday the 19th?
We're doing
I don't have
Okay.
any.
No, we canceled that.
We canceled that because it'd be over.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
okay. So yeah, so that's, I think that's a plan, so yes, we've got Friday morning next week for sure, we've got. It's the normal Tuesday after the 2:00 if we need to.
It's likely gonna be after the 2 o'clock, the agenda, and preliminary agenda for next week looks like Tuesday mornings. It'll probably be a Tuesday after. Or after legislative.
Okay. And just let me know, because I've got to be back in Charlotte, so I will be with Anovia next week. So I'll be zooming in on Tuesday.
Sounds good. All week? Or?
Yes.
Okay,
I fly back late Thursday night, so I'll be here for Friday.
you will be. Got it.
Yes.
Okay.
You're going nowhere, mister.
Yeah,
New
you're not
dad,
going.
you're not going anywhere.
Okay, well, then we will adjourn for today
Big
and see
trouble.
everybody back